most. We're going to talk about asset replacement on the water side, and then water and general capital projects, because we weren't quite ready to talk about general capital projects at our first budget workshop. So Stuart and Kyle are going to help us through the general as well as the water, because we'll be able to bring you closer to what's happening in 23 and then some updates. Hotel occupancy tax, and then library memorial grant fund, and then a few other things that will impact the budget, and then some other things that we need to kind of hold for discussion items for now and in the future, just kind of giving you some things that are coming up and things we're going to have to talk about. So that's what we're going to cover today. The next page here is just your calendar. We've seen this. It's the same one I show you every month at council presentations, and also we've seen it at other workshops that we've done, but just so that you know where we are. Hopefully by the 25th we'll have certified property tax roll, and I'll be able to get closer on general fund property tax revenue. And then on the 8th we'll be presenting the proposed budget and the proposed tax rate, and then the first reading of the budget and the tax rate on the 22nd, and the second reading on the 12th. So any questions on calendar or things you'd like to see different? Okay, so the next slide, and I know we talk a lot about inflation, but I think for those of us who were here and lived through the fiscal year 23 budget process, you understand why. Had a huge impact on 23, and we're continuing to just watch inflation and see what's happening. So when I pulled this about a week ago to put this inflation graph in, we were at 4%. Jacob pulled one this morning, and we were at 2.97. So the Fed's goal, remember, is 2%. So we'll see. Again, they held on any rate increases in June, just to see kind of what the impact was of what they've done over the past year, and clearly it's pushing down. So we're just continuing to watch that. And someone said something that Joe said yesterday in the meeting, that you know, a budget is a blueprint. Is that what you said? And I was telling Trina, I read somewhere that it's an art, not a science. And it really is, because there's no magic, there's no science, everything changes constantly. So really it's just using everyone's brain and using the best information you can to look at trends and build forecasts the best you can to make sure we're presenting as good information as we can at the time. And a good example of that, if you look at the fuel graph, look where we were this time last year. I mean, we were well over $4 at the pump, and today we're, you know, $3.10 or less. And so within a 12-month period of time, that's what's happened. And so it's constantly moving and constantly changing. So, you know, that's what we're kind of bringing you today. So this is information you've seen before, but I just wanted to put it out there. The next page you have something we put together just to kind of show you some other factors that we bring in when we're dealing specifically with water. We talk all the time about how rainfall affects consumption and water sales, and so, you know, we want to make our budget and we want to, you know, have adequate water sales to be able to cover operations and those kind of things, but we also want to encourage consumption and, you know, follow our long-range master plan and those kind of things. So it's kind of just a more graphical view of what's happening overall, and I thought it was interesting that through June of 23, we're almost to where we were through the entire calendar year for 22 as far as rainfall. So you can see, just looking year over year, how, you know, it can change and fluctuate, and all of those things affect this. So that's what makes water a little bit more difficult than general fund, because your revenues are more stable on the general fund side. So on the water fund side, it's just it's more of just really trying to forecast what's going to happen in the future. So next slide here is just a snip of the long-range forecast that we showed you in February. I will say that when we're working through this, our revenues and expenses are pretty close in line. So I think, you know, just watching what's happened over the past year and seeing, you know, prices fluctuate up and down, or at least leveling on the inflation side, we're not seeing the 20% increases that we were talking to you about last year. We're still seeing, we haven't seen everybody say, oh, well, inflation's lower, so let's take prices down. That's not happening. But we're not seeing those huge increases that we just weren't sure we could be able to predict for 23. So it's a living forecast. We work on it all the time. It's kind of our guide to making sure that, you know, A, we're budgeting correctly, B, as we're looking at expenses month over month, that they're lining up with what we're forecasting, and if they're not, why, what's happening, and then adjusting the forecast moving forward so, you know, that we can bring the best information we can. So the next page, Trina put this together. It's just a graphical look at the forecast. I know everybody has a little bit different eye in the way they understand things, so it's exactly what you saw on the page prior, just in graphical form, so that you can see kind of how expenses line up, you know, operations to all the little other parts, and then the black line, of course, is your revenue as we have it forecasted.
That's
Okay.
interesting, I like that.
Yeah, well, everybody's eye can kind of absorb things a little bit different, and if you can kind of see, it's just a different way to look at it. You know, we look at spreadsheets all the time, so that makes sense to us, but, you know, we also realize, you know, if you can look at a picture, sometimes you can say, yeah, I can see that better, how exactly each category lines up with what we're forecasting. Okay, so jumping in then to water fund, just the overview, it is the second largest fund of the city. It's the only other fund within the city that is required to be balanced. So, you know, we have 28 funds or somewhere in that neighborhood, and there's only 2 that are required to be balanced, and that's the general fund and the water fund. And that's because all the other funds have special circumstances, some of which we don't even budget revenue or expenses for because we don't know what's going to happen. So we talk about that through our proposed budget. We do have proposed changes to utility rates, as we've talked about. We're conservative, as always, for average users, really trying to protect those people who aren't using a lot of water, and then in line with Kerrville 2050 and keeping those higher tiers. Of course, they're going to cost more the more water you use, and that's just in line with our water conservation efforts that we continue to talk about. Our largest operating expense, of course, is personnel. That's in every fund. And then followed by maintenance and supply expenses. And in the water fund, you know, your maintenance and supplies don't change a lot based on your rainfall, as if your water sales can change a lot based on your rainfall. So the operations are the operations for the most part. The system has to be operating at capacity at all times, so those expenses don't change much. The largest division in the water fund is water production, and so that's where our water comes from. Second, I would think would be, I'm sorry, without looking, is going to be on the water reclamation, because they are processing water after it's been produced. So currently, as we're proposing this today, or the information I'm going to use preliminary, because, you know, we could change things if council decides to do that, but we are in balance with what we're proposed today in the water fund. So that was good news to us that we were able to get it in balance this early. I say early, we've got, 2 weeks to be able to file the budget, but it's been a process getting there, and I think really incorporating assets, as we've talked about, and then facilities and those kind of things that we're continuing to work on long-term plans for, which we're going to be bringing you more on that with the proposed budget in August, and then some long-range plans in September as well. 24 is right now budgeted at a 5.8% increase over 23. 23 was 7% over 22, so just for a little history there. Okay, just a graphical view of revenues and expenses here. This just kind of outlines, you know, which revenues are what percent of the overall budget, and then which expenses by department. This is something we show in the budget book. We didn't do this in budget presentation last year, but this just kind of shows you where money is spent, and then by which departments are utilizing the most of that. And you see, you know, transfers, of course, is a big portion, but just like we talk about on the general fund, every water fund, I'm going to say, so O2 as we talk about operating, and then water asset replacement fund, your debt fund, and then water capital projects, those all come together for financial reporting. So when we talk about transfers out, most of this is being transferred to another water fund, I guess, for lack of an easier way to say that. So it's all still within the water fund. It's just we're moving it out for budgetary reasons so that you can see it as we budget every fund. So water fund operations are funding all of these water type funds. We just spread it out so that everyone is designated for clarity, so you can see exactly where we're spending money. So that's why that transfer looks big, and you'll see, I mean, it's no different than last year. The little box at the bottom kind of gives you an update of what last year was so that you can see the alignment, and we were surprised that it's almost identical in percent of distribution as it was last year on revenues and expenses. So that's good news. We've looked back the last 2 or 3 years, and it's been that way, which just tells us that, you know, we're at least being consistent with reporting, and then also with budgeting, which is what we really want to do. Okay, and the last summary slide here is just a little bit different view of revenues and expenses. And so you'll see service revenues within the proposed budget, and then also within the budget book, we're going to break those out a little more in detail so you can see service revenues that include water sales, sewer sales, reuse is going to be in there. There's some other service factors, waste disposal and some things like that. So, but for the purposes of this, just showing you basically what is overall revenues within the water fund. Remembering that 97% of our revenues coming in are consumption-based. So the other 3% is gonna be things like meters and taps and those things. Interest line, you'll see that's a lot bigger this year than we budgeted in the past. We're exceeding interest revenue, and we all know why. I mean, as the, prices are up in the market, well, we're also getting better returns, and so we're just trying to capitalize on that while we can. I think 18 months ago, our pools were less than 1%, and now they're over 5%. So that's just another one of those predictability things. You just can't guess. You just have to kind of take it when you can get it, and so we're trying to capitalize on every investment that we can right now to just boost our fund balance and those things. Personnel is our biggest percent change. Group insurance is going to be one of our largest categories there, and so we went back and looked. Last year we budgeted 5% over, or that's actually where it came in over prior year. This year it's 15. So we're seeing some pretty big, and that's nationwide, and we've done a lot of checking, and I think we talked about that in the general fund, that everyone nationwide is seeing those kind of increases on any kind of benefits and insurance things.
15% is average trend right now.
Yeah, and really we got lucky because it was coming back a lot higher than that, and Kim's got the 25th, I think we have that
Next
workshop.
Tuesday workshop.
Yes. Supplies actually down from last year, but remember the increases that we saw from last year. So 2.7% down over last year. I think they were 15% up. I don't know if you really call that a decline over this year's budget, but still trending up over the past few years as far as overall cost. Maintenance just 1% up, but last year we had a 21% up. And remember, a lot of that was the annual expense that we added to water production for the granular activated carbon that we added as a regular recurring expense. So that was a pretty big driver on the maintenance side last year, and it's just flattening because we're keeping that in there year over year, and that's because we have set it up now to where they have 4, what do you call those?
Trains or canisters?
Okay, canisters, we'll go with that. If you've never seen them, it's actually pretty cool. If you've never been to the water plant and seen their operation, it's really neat. But there's 4 of them, and so we replaced them this year. We got them all new. Some of it came in last year and some of it came in this year. And now we have it set up to where every year we're replacing 2. So that way it's really helping with TTHMs and that kind of stuff, which I'm not an expert on. So Stuart can talk more about that if you have questions. But that's what that driving factor was last year in that category. Everything else is really in line. Transfers out up a little bit, but that is primarily for assets that we've talked about, and then some CIP stuff that we've talked about during forecasting. So no surprises. We'll give it to Trina to talk through some history and then some rate conversations. So stop. If anybody have any questions on what we talked about so far, and please interrupt me because I know I talk fast. It's just what I do.
All right, so we know that 96% of our water and sewer sales are consumption-based, so those are the biggest driving factors for our revenue sources, so it takes a lot to get to what rates we're going to set to get there. So just a little bit of history on the rate structure, or what we've been through with this rates period. So in 2019, we had New Gens come on and do a rate analysis and take into account all of our debt and infrastructure needs and a lot of things down the line to determine where we really need to be. They were looking at hefty increases, but council wasn't ready to go that direction, so we kind of scaled it back and took some baby steps. So in 2020, we implemented a base rate increase at $3.18 to bring us up a little bit, and as well as for the single household citizens and customers, we implemented 1,000 gallons in the base rate, so that helped out a little bit for those on a fixed income. And we had some very moderate tier rate increases ranging from the 23 cents to $1.63 depending on how much consumption they used. So 2021 we had COVID going on and we opted not to increase any rates to help everyone in the hard trying times. And then 22 we tried to get back online with what the rate study wanted us to do. So we implemented some base rate increases, 2%, very minimal, and then 2% tiers throughout. We always keep in mind the conservation efforts on the back end, so those using a little bit more water is going to cost a little bit more, so they had a little bit higher rate increases. For the most part, 23, we really are trying to get back on track, re-implement a multi-year plan and move forward and land on that so that we can get where we're trying to go. So right now, last year, we had increased our base rate by 10%, brought it up to $1.60, and then we had anywhere from 14 cents to 44 cents per 1,000 gallons on the tier schedule. We have built a new model on our, for predicting revenues and whatnot. So it's tracking pretty close. We're trending right along, and looks like everything's going to meet where we expect it to. We have to break down all the tiers, the consumption that falls into every tier category, 0 to 1,000, all the way up to 50,000 plus, and it just gets very granular trying to predict that. So this year we are implementing some very modest rate increases again, but we're building towards trying to get to a median base rate that we're seeing in the industry. Ours are kind of low, and we'll go through that here in a second, couple slides. We're trying to build towards that so that we can stabilize revenues and just get that growth where we need it to be. Sorry. So as stated before, we have 1,000 gallons first built into the base rate, and that's for the single household customers. They're looking at, what's that, $19.36. If they use less than 1,000 gallons, then that's what they'll pay on their water portion of the billing. This helps us, the people on monthly budgets, you know, low income, they can afford that. It helps our lower volume users with those less tier rate, not increase the tiers as much. And then we always had to take into account the rain and all that. So we're just trying to bring it all together and find the common ground and make sure that it's good for everyone across the board. We are going to maintain our variable rate structure, so if they're using more, they're obviously going to have a little bit more price increase. So this next slide here are the proposals for fiscal year 24. And as stated, we're looking at $1.76 on the base rate. That will include 1,000 gallons of water. And then anywhere from 5 cents to 18 cents per 1,000 gallons from the lowest users to the highest users. If you can see over there to the right, in 2023, majority of our customers landed in the 1,000 to 6,000 gallon range is what their average user household is. And then you have a few up there in the 50,000 gallons. Basically,
Thank you. Sorry.
we typically average about 2,000 to 2,500 per person in the household. So if a household of 5, that's 10 to 12,000 gallons per month in domestic use. Anything over that, it's probably irrigation. So most times they're going to fall in that higher category, the higher tier, and end up having to pay a little bit higher rate. Our base rate increase, that does help us maintain that steady revenue source. Right now, looking at it on a big picture, our base rate makes up about 40% of our revenue, and the 60% is actual tiers. And obviously, it's volatile. We don't know what we're not sure how that's going to come in, depending on weather, drought conditions, or whatnot. So if we can maintain that base rate and draw in that steady revenue, it'll keep us, in line where we need to be to cover operations and the expense of maintaining the system. All right, this one here is our proposed sewer rates for fiscal year 24. Looking at increasing from $16.50 per account to $18.15. That's $1.65 base charge there. And then your tier scale will be 29 cents per 1,000 gallons on the tier. So this year, April, our sewer averages process takes place, and looks like the citizens, the sewer average is pretty much the same again. We were at 5,300 gallons per household last year, and it landed right there again this year. So pretty much the way I explain it is, habits don't change. You take the same showers, do the same laundry, same dishes, and all that is domestic use. The most stuff that changes is the irrigation or outside uses or other purposes of the water. So we feel like those are pretty moderate for the average citizen. And for those of you who don't know, or remind you, that we take the December, January, and February months of water consumption and average that out, and that sets your sewer rate for the next year to come. So your sewer will stay the same on every bill until the next April. All right, and this is a look at what a water and sewer bill together combined would do for an average citizen. So that 5,300 gallons is marked out in gray. So last year's rate increases, the average user had a $74.26 water and sewer bill. For proposal fiscal year 24, it's $78.92. Average monthly is $4.66, and for the year would be right about $56. So we just want to show that, how that will affect the average customer.
And how did you get the 5,300? What's that? What's like the size of a family you'd usually consider that for?
Well, that is actual consumption that we, you literally take every account.
That's
and-
it for the entire city.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so here, this is a kind of a benchmark of other cities and what their rates are, and we've showed y'all this before, but this is what the other cities' fiscal year 23 schedules, so what their rates were in 23. We're comparing Carville to what they offer, and as you see, Carville's down there on the lower end, next to Fredericksburg there. We are trying to kind of get to a median or average, just to make sure we are in line with industry as well as maintaining our system. And Ms. Eichner said before, don't worry about all the other pieces, worry about what we have to take care of. And we are. We're just trying to make sure that we stay consistent, and not just the off person. Let's see here. That's pretty much just a glimpse of where we would be if we were to keep those same rates. We threw this in here, we've had this in here before, we do, I'm sorry.
Sorry, the figures, thank you. The figures that are in the, that comparison chart there, can you help me understand where we're getting the 3269 and the 4157 for Kerrville?
Yes, so this is average 5,300 gallon customer, and these are all flowing through 1-inch meters, so we took all of the rates from each of these cities for a 1-inch, and I will keep in mind that everybody bills differently. Some have 1,000 gallons built in, some have different rates for multi-units and different things like that. But we took the 5,300 gallons across each of those with those rates and calculated out what it would be
Okay.
For every city.
for every city, yes.
So every city was using that hour average of 5,300.
No, we took our average of 5,300 and applied it to the rates that we saw, so we could get somewhat apples to apples for an average user. Because everybody bills a little bit differently. So we applied
Yes.
their rate structure to our 5,300.
Right,
And
which
said,
was the same, yeah.
yes,
Yeah,
exactly. Now, also, it's important to know every water system is different too. So some of these cities, and I can't speak to every one, but, some of them have their own water system, some of them don't, some of them are buying from other places. We've talked about our uniqueness of our water system because of topography and those, some of them have some of this, some of them don't. So this is just kind of looking at, cities that are close to us that we've used for benchmarks for other things. So there's nothing saying they have the same operating system or expenses we do. We're just trying to get as close as we can to some sort of comparison.
I think at least one of these doesn't have a wastewater treatment plant,
Right.
so that's why their sewer rate would be lower, because they don't, have to operate it, they just have a transfer out.
Right. Or it could be higher in some cases
Or it
because
could
of
be
that,
higher
because they're
because of
paying
that, yeah.
someone else to process either their wastewater or bringing in their water from other sources. So it's really hard to get to apples. You just have to kind of pick your benchmarks and get some sort of comparison just so you can see what other people are doing.
I do believe some of these are debt comparison cities. Obviously, they're going to issue debt to pay for their infrastructure, same type of situation as us. So some of that is built into their rates as well. So some of these do fall in our comparison cities for debt also.
Okay, thank you.
Not all of them have water treatment plants. Matter of fact, very few of them have water treatment plants. Most of them run on groundwater, which is very inexpensive to produce, so.
And still are higher rates than we are for right now.
We threw in just helpful resources, just so you know, we do offer assistance to customers, or we work with other agencies to help with citizens in the community who need help paying utility bills or whatnot. I mean, we would go to the extent of sending them that way to help with a leak, But we work with CAM, St. Vincent, Salvation Army. Right now, Community Council of South Central Texas, they are government funded, and they offer opportunities for customers to have multiple months of billings taken care of for them. There's different, all types of walks of life that we see, so, everyone, we try to assist where we can if they're having trouble with, utilities and stuff. Any questions on any of the water rates or how we got there?
So, tell me if I'm understanding this correctly. The reason why we have a rate schedule that continues to increase is because it's part of the 2050 plan to help ensure that we're conserving water in the community, is that right? I mean, that's
Yes
what it
and
looked
no,
like it
because
said
if
on
you
this,
look at the forecast,
I mean, if that's what it looks like it says on page 14
well,
of
we're
this.
gonna continue to say that your higher tiers are gonna cost more because of water conservation. So when you have a residential user that's using 100,000 gallons of water a month, and there are some out there, you know, the idea is if it costs a little bit more, they're gonna use a little bit less, to, you know, keep things green, than they are for showers and drinking water and, daily household needs. So, but I think it's a multi-answer, because if you look at the forecast, you have to also consider that our rates, because it's 97% of our revenue for the water fund, and we wish it wasn't like that, and we've talked through multiple opportunities, as we talked about in February, for other opportunities to spread out some of that. Operating expenses are operating expenses, and so those things are gonna continue to grow. I mean, we've seen it over the past, I don't know, my 50 years, or since I could remember, to pay attention to that stuff, it continues to grow. So things aren't getting cheaper, so we have to make decisions about what is the best way to spread revenue, to be able to cover those operating expenses. Because if it rains, we still have to operate the water system. If it's in a drought, we still have to operate that. And so those expenses don't vary very much. And that's why that forecast is so important, because we can look at historically what has happened. We can look at things like long-range master plans that we have in place and what's it gonna cost moving forward, whether it's through debt issuance or through cash funding or whatever we decide to do. We have to cover those expenses. And so I think it's more about the forecasting and more about being able to have the revenues we need to support what the operating is gonna cost, but then also about being fair to the citizen and trying to protect those who are, A, protecting our water source, and then B, who really someone using 1,000 gallons shouldn't be charged the same rate as someone who's irrigating their lawn. And so it's kind of a multifaceted model, and we talked a lot about that model in February in our forecasting. But Trina's done a great job in the last 3 years, I would say, really honing in on that model. And I know back on one slide, and I'll just say this, 22 was the first year since 2016 that we met budget for water and sewer. And that was using that new model. And 23 is tracking identical. Now, we're in a drought, or did we do everything right? Probably not. You know, there's gonna be some variation. You get as close as you can with what you know. But using the information that she has historically by tier, by consumer, what's that use look like, where is it coming from, you can get a much better idea of what your long-range plan needs to be. So really, it's about spreading out where the revenue comes from in a little more equitable way. Does that make sense?
And with the schedule that we adopted last year, the rates that are being proposed, where are we in line with that?
So we didn't adopt that last year. Remember,
Pardon?
we had to kind of toss that because of inflation. So we adopted that at the end of the prior year, so the fall of 21, and that was before
Right.
all that inflation hit. And
Yeah.
so what we've kind of been working on is really watching all the things we've talked about as far as what's inflation doing, what are prices doing, how is it leveling, those kind of things. And when are we feel like we're comfortable bringing you back a long-range plan based on the fact that we feel like it's leveled enough to say we're not going to see another 30% price increase on pipe or whatever anytime soon, so we don't have to have the same conversation next year. So our plan is September.
Yes.
To bring you a long-range plan based on what Trina has put together from consumption and just different water types that are being used and how it's being sourced. Looking forward. So we're hoping to bring you something 5 years is the plan, but at least 3, I would
In
say.
terms of the fee
in
schedule?
September.
The rate
No,
schedule,
it won't be in the fee
that's what I was
schedule. We'll do
referring
it,
to.
but we'll bring you a request for resolution is what we'll do,
Because
just
that's
like
what
we
we
did before.
adopted last year. That's what I was referring to. that
Yes,
one.
yes. So our hope is that, you know, especially you're seeing, 2.9% inflation now.
Right.
You're not seeing those huge fluctuations that we were anymore. We feel like there's some leveling. We're seeing it across the board, seeing it on sales tax. So we feel like there's some leveling going on, or we know there is. So once we kind of feel like we're in a comfortable place to confidently say this is what we feel like it should look like, so we don't have to next year say, well, we did all this work and you adopted this resolution, but guess what? It's not going to work,
Right.
because
So-
that's what happened.
So then my question was, with that schedule that we adopted last year, where are we in terms of the rates we're adopting or you're proposing for us to adopt in
Right.
this fiscal year in comparison to where we were supposed
What
to
that
be, or
original
where our
21
estimate
plan
was.
I don't
Those
know.
are
I
very
can find
modest.
out.
It was like 2% base charges, 1%
Yeah.
tier increases.
This is higher than that.
Oh, yes.
Where your base increase here is higher, but your tier increases are pretty moderate, so,
Okay.
yeah, it's a clear change, but,
We can pull it and find out, but honestly, I didn't go back and look at that.
Right.
Because that plan kind of went out the window with inflation, unfortunately.
Okay.
Best made plans, you know? But we're hoping to be able to bring that back to you. Our plan is in September, to give you an update on all of those things and bring back a different resolution to plan for. That's the hope.
Okay. My only thing is, we may want to try to look at if we need to repeal that resolution. I mean, it's a policy that council set in terms of what we want to take a look at and do, and I just want to make sure if we're going to adopt something on a budget that contradicts what we actually put in terms of a policy and a resolution, that if that's something we need to do, let's repeal that, so we don't have two standing documents where one contradicts the other.
Of course, yeah. And I know we talked about that a little bit last year, but we didn't
Sure.
find that out. But we'll get with Mike and see what the legal process, if any, the budget adoption may take care of that. I'm not sure, but we'll talk through that and make sure, yeah, if we need to do that, we'll definitely will. Because it is a change from what we brought in 21,
Right.
because we're in a different economy than we were.
Yes.
I think we all are. So,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. No
And
problem.
you said you may bring a 3-year and a 5-year, or?
Yeah, I think we're gonna kinda, my hope would be a 5. But
I-
we did that, last time, and then, who could have thought,
True,
what happened in
true.
22 mid-year happened? No one saw that coming as much as maybe someone did that was more of an economist, than I am, but I don't think anyone in this room saw what we, saw it coming. What we actually had to deal with, mid-year 22 with fuel and, fuel was the biggest driver on the water fund, and I know we talk about that, but everything almost that we use in the water fund is petroleum-based, and so when fuel prices went crazy, then everything that we're putting in the ground, did the same exact thing, so.
But at least a 3-year, for sure.
Yes, I mean, my hope would be a 5, but I mean, Trina and I'll discuss that and then bring it back to Kim and Michael and see what their guidance is on that. But we wanna have something in place that aligns with our forecast, that gives us something looking forward, for a multitude of reasons. We want people to know what's going on, it allows people to plan, but then also, makes budgeting easier, because we know ahead of time, what council direction is, what the adopted, rate plan is, and we can build off of that, and unless there's some extraordinary circumstances like we've dealt with, and that should be our guide. And it really does save a lot of work all around, and it definitely lets the public know what's happening moving forward. And we talked about in our forecasting meeting in February too, the idea is to level that, we get to where we feel like we've implemented a lot of the, long-range plans, we've, really dealt with some of the capital needs that we continue to talk about, and that there's some leveling, in our rate structure, and we have that built out in our forecast. So far, it's aligning, for 23, 24 is looking like it's right in line. If we're correct in our modeling on revenues and things like that, then we feel like there will be some leveling, which is really what we want, for everyone, so that's the idea. Anything else on, or discussion or questions on any of those proposals or concerns, things you would like to see different, presented different? Okay. Let's hop into water fund asset replacement. So we continue to talk about asset replacement on a large scale, and so our budget team, as you know, did a lot of work to go out and identify what we own, the condition of what we own, even outside of rolling stock, large equipment, small equipment, facilities, and those kind of things. We're currently in the middle of just finalizing actually an RFP. We should be getting bids, and Kyle can speak to this, on a facility assessment. So we'll be looking at that citywide to see, what facilities we have out there and what the needs are within those facilities, so that we can talk about how we're gonna address them, short-term, long-term, those kind of things, and again, with long-term planning. So we hope not to have surprises. That's the big hope always. There's always gonna be things we can't predict, of course. But we're really trying to put in a 5-year plan for asset replacement and for facility, whether it's maintenance or system repair or whatever happens to be done. So our staff has done a lot of work internally to kind of prepare for this company to come in, so they're not having to get down into, I guess, the nitty-gritty inventory of things. and we can kind of point them at the things where we say, okay, we wanna know what your condition assessment is of X, and then we wanna know, you know, what is that gonna look like going forward? You know, age and repair and maintenance and upkeep, you know, HVAC, and we talk about it even in this building that we're in. You build it and it's beautiful and it's new, and then it's not, and so then it has to be repaired and replaced, and so we wanna have a long-term plan for that, and so, we're doing the same thing on the water side. And so I would say we're probably a little closer on the water side, just because we've done so much master planning as far as infrastructure and those kind of things, and we've done a lot of internal work from a staff side. So for the purposes of this 24 presentation, our hope is that by when we present the budget to you on the 8th, we will have a long-term plan, at least on the vehicle and equipment side, probably not fully on the facility side, but so that you can kind of see. We've been working with Guillermo, the garage, independent departments, and we've been doing a lot of right sizing. So departments have really gone in and taken a look at their inventory and said, well, this is really up for replacement, but you know what, we don't use this as much as we thought we would. So we're gonna get rid of this, and we're gonna go get a piece of equipment that works better for us, and that's probably gonna last longer, and that makes more sense operationally, and will save the city some money. And so we've seen a lot of that too, and so I think really having that group of people in a room together and looking at this from an organizational wide standpoint and not just from a department siloed only standpoint, I think has been beneficial to all of us, because we've kind of had to take a look at a broader picture really of what's going on. So what you'll see in this is a beginning fund balance. So this is pretty much exactly what you see as we present it in the budget presentation, and a little bit more granular than we present within the fund summaries in the budget book. But beginning balance for water fund, right about 800,000. We had budgeted transfers in 500,000 for fiscal year 23. Asset disposal proceeds, and you'll see that's an estimate for year end this year. We'd only budgeted about 15,000 because you never really know what you're going to sell. But that's just a testament to stuff that people have said, hey, here, let's sell this. It's just sitting here. Let's get rid of that and put that back into fund balance and contribute somewhere else. Interest and miscellaneous, of course, interest is higher right now, so we're just plugging that in and taking advantage of that where we can. So total revenues there. We have existing leases pulled out, so those are leases that are already budgeted for fiscal year 23. We have those, we own them, or we're in process of getting them. So that's going to be an ongoing expense as we talk about anytime you go into a lease, you're in an agreement. So those are expenses that have to happen before we do anything else. Then you see the purchases down there. So one of the requests this year, and actually requests over the last several years, has been some covered parking for equipment at the utility yard. So that's going to be over on McFarland, where the utility complex is. You know, we have $300,000-$400,000 pieces of equipment out there and not a cover for them. So as we're talking about taking care of things and longevity and making it last, we kind of felt like that's a small investment to make, to put our big tractors and VACCONs and those kind of things in a place where they're not sitting out in 110-degree heat with hoses rotting and those kind of things, because they just deteriorate so quickly when they're not protected. The replacement aging meter infrastructure you see there, that came out of our budget team meeting too, really identifying the fact that some of our compound meters and things like that that are $2,000, $3,000 at a time have been in the ground for 12, 15 years. And while the guys do regular maintenance on top assemblies and those kind of things to make sure that we have a meter tester in our warehouse, if you've never seen it, it's kind of cool, that they can actually pull a meter and take it in and test it to see what the accuracy is to make sure it's billing correctly. But some of those things are just getting old, and so we need to replace some compound meters. As we've started putting in AMI, has been great, and we're 60-something% reading right now just on the 3 data collectors we have. So we feel like as we install the next 2, that it's going to allow for more proactive maintenance, which is, you know, was one of the whole implications of putting the AMI in place anyway, was time and just not being so reactive. And so we need to replace some old boxes, we need to replace some meters, we need to upgrade some registers just because they're old. And so that's what that line is for. We have a large Freightliner utility truck, and I'm sure you've seen the water distribution folks using it when they're out doing testing or putting in brand new lines or working on manholes. We have one, we actually have 2 that need to be replaced. One that's more critical than the other, so we have this one for this year and then one planned for next year. Breaker attachment, that's this tractor piece, and a utility trailer that's going to be for exactly what it is, just an enclosed cargo trailer for their equipment. A tractor that we need to replace, and then at Water Reclamation, one of the things they found when they assessed is they can actually get rid of at least 1 truck that they have, and maybe 2, and replace it with a utility vehicle that's gonna last longer, that they can use around the plant. So just things that we've kind of discovered as we've worked through this process, as far as what can we get rid of, what do we need, what's better for operations. So, proposed expenses in '24, a little over 400,000 with the estimating fund balance of 946. Keeping in mind, we're forward thinking, as we're building that fund balance, and just really trying to, plan for the next 5 years. And so within the proposed budget book, our hope is that you see a 5-year plan, at least on the vehicle and equipment side, not on the facility side yet, but the vehicle and equipment side.
When you guys go to sell stuff, how does that process work? Do you auction it, or do you?
Yeah, so we put it on a site called GovDeals, and anyone can sign up, and purchase things off of there, but that makes that process fair. So
Okay.
we're not, kind of making a backyard deal with someone, or, selling to someone we know for a lesser price, but it goes out there on GovDeals, and we have someone that posts, pretty much anything that we have for sale, from anything, whether it's electronics or copiers or vehicles, equipment, you name it,
Okay.
we've sold it on GovDeals. And so you can go on there, a lot of cities use it, so anyone can go on there and buy it. We even sell things like old meters, because they don't have any use to us, but people will buy them for either parts or the copper. And so they'll buy them like by the trash can full or something like that. So we don't throw away any of that kind of stuff. We either take it to recycle, and any recycle money we get goes back into this fund, or we sell it on GovDeals for,
Okay.
if it's $10, it's $10 we didn't have before, so.
And it is an auction.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry?
It is an
It is
auction.
an auction?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And sometimes, we have seen in the past year, especially since vehicle prices have been so high, we're getting more on trade-in than we could on an auction site.
Okay.
And so if the company would give us, an adequate trade-in, then that becomes revenue. So we don't use it as, yes, it reduces the cost of the check we're writing, but we take the trade-in and count that as revenue.
Oh,
And
right.
the expense is still the full expense.
Right.
So that way we're really recording it as if we had sold it, because that's what we would do if we'd sold it
Yeah.
on GovDeals. So it's money
Okay.
we didn't have, so.
I
Any-
think your asset replacement exercise is wonderful, so applaud you for that.
We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about each other's departments, we've learned a lot about the city as a whole, and I think it's really given everyone an opportunity to, you put the right people in the room, and it's not all a director team. We have some staff, several staff, who are just key staff who really are out there and know what's happening and what's going on, that we've brought into that conversation, and that's been very, very helpful for us.
Important to know what you've got,
That's
so.
right.
All right, next slide is water fund debt service, and it's pretty much what it is. So we have included here our new revenue bonds. We had a year and a half of capitalized interest on those. First principal payment, or actually first payment, it doesn't go out till August of '25, so that's built in there. Total debt service for the year is $4.2 million, and that is 27% of our water fund revenues, and our policy limit is 35% or below, so we're well under that. We are this year, this August, paying off a 2008 series. It was the original amount of $2.67 million for system improvements, for what I could find. It was a multitude of reasons on the list, but that is coming off, so that's one less payment we'll be making, but we've replaced it. Anyways, we have the debt issuance purposes listed there if you wanted to know those for each of those series. But moving right along with those.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over for a minute, to Stuart or Kyle to talk us through your big sheets here. We have in the slides just, overview, but they'll be happy to answer questions or talk you through anything on CIP, that you might have questions about.
Can I ask a question about the debt service?
Yes.
Before we get, does that mean that the 2.6 million for the final payment is gonna be taken off of the 4.2 that we have, so it'll drop down, or is that after it drops, the 4?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
So looking at the, debt service is gonna be 4.2 million, and we're talking about the final payment. Is that final payment 2.6?
4.2 only includes what's due in 24, yeah, so you don't have that 2008 series in there at all.
But the annual payment wasn't 2.67.
No, that was the original.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Right, yeah.
It gets confusing. There's
I was just trying to get an understanding of what we're dropping off, what the total is, and
So the last
that the
payment's
4
like
point,
$225,000.
and the 4.2 didn't even include any of that. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And that last payment, so we pay debt in August and February,
Uh-huh.
just so you know, so we have 2 payments on most series every year. There's a couple that might only have one. For the most
Right.
part, every series has 2 payments,
Yep.
February and August. So we keep it within the fiscal year, it's a lot easier to track.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions before I start? Okay, good morning. So first we have our water capital. Just want to go through a few of these. If you have questions, feel free to stop me. Yeah, Julie's mentioned the AMI, you know, as that's progressing through, mostly through her department. We've got a few things going on that, as we're going through our projects, that we try to help them with those meter boxes and any antennas and stuff like that. So that's kind of a dual effort, mostly through theirs. NAP wastewater collection, you have not seen the road closures yet because, as we're seeing across the board with everything, supply chain issues are delaying things. The guys have been trying to do some work. They did the bore under Harper Highway. That's actually complete, it just with the casing, but we don't have manholes for them to really start. So we're expecting those by the end of this month. Once those come in, then you're gonna see closures for West Main, for Center, for Woodlawn. I expect my phone to be ringing at that point. Hopefully we can answer most of those questions, but if you have constituents that are coming to you, feel free to reach out to us when they have those issues. We're gonna try to continually keep them updated through press releases. That's a large project. I mean, if you think we're going from Town Creek to Walmart, all through those neighborhoods, it's gonna have a significant impact. That one's slated for about April completion. So just to give you an idea of how much time we're talking, that time between now and then is gonna be those road closures. Just as a reminder of what that is funded by, I'd always like to bring it up because we do have those. That is the remaining Legion lift station funds that the Water Development Board allowed us to allocate towards the SNAP project. So we needed, I think, $2 million, if I remember right, from the revenue bonds. And so we got $2 million revenue bonds, and the remaining was from the Water Development Board Legion lift station funding. Lowest Methodist pressure plant improvements. So that has the lowest ground storage tank being rehabbed, in addition to the Methodist encampment well, and getting some reconfiguration so we can do some blending, get that well in service. Right now it's in emergency status only. We did, again, receive funding approval from the remaining THM for the lowest tank. So not the Methodist site improvements. We have them as one contract, but we're going to be treating those as 2 separate construction contracts because they are a little bit different, but more so because of timing.
What's THM?
That's the trihalomethanes, the big filters. So we had a $5 million loan from Water Development Board. The remaining funds, I think it was about $800,000. So, yes, sir.
So the lowest tank is being rehabbed or is it being replaced?
It's going to be replaced. Yes.
And what's the timeline for completion on that?
Yes.
Just because people want to know.
Right. Yeah. So we're going through we have to go through all the environmental on the THM process, the drinking water fund process. That's usually about 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
We've reached out to Walker Partners, who's doing the design, as well as Freeze and Nichols as kind of our Water Development Board liaison, but they also did the THM project. So we're having them just kind of partner up and get this thing through Water Development Board approval so we can go as quick as possible.
Okay.
Quick is a loose term there with Water Development Board.
Yeah.
So the state, anything that we do with the state right now is a big challenge because,
Yeah.
30% of everyone there in the state quit during the walkout in the last couple of years. So we're either dealing with new folks or they have staffing shortages. So it's taken longer than we wanted to
When
be.
you hear that it sometimes costs more to get bonds than what they're worth,
Yeah.
this is one of them. I mean, this is a delay. We've been waiting on this project for over 1.5 years now, mostly waiting for the state approval on different things. And as you do, the value of your money's been eroding. And so what you're getting in those grants, sometimes it's hard to justify, it costs more to get the grant than the grant's worth.
Yeah.
This is not unlike the CDBG grant. We thought we were gonna have all three of those projects in there, and at the end of the day, we got one project paid for out of that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, state money is great, but
Mhm.
comes at a
Well,
cost.
and Guadalupe River Crossing is another perfect example.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, we got a big chunk of money, but we're still waiting on a big chunk of it to be
Mhm.
reimbursed to us just because of the process.
Mm.
So it is coming back, but it's a
Yeah.
process.
And as far as staff shortage, the last number I heard was over 50% staff shortage on the water development board.
That's what I heard too.
Wow, okay.
Do you have a question? No. Oh, sorry. Wastewater clarifier, we will be bringing a construction contract to you, hopefully within about 2 months, about the end of September is what I'm shooting for. We've got Freese Nichols contract on design of that. We're looking to wrap that up first part of August. Go about a month of bidding to get something, and so about September, October timeframe, we're hoping to get that. That's gonna kind of sit, and it's gonna be one of those hurry up and wait, because we're gonna have to go through a lot of review process, get submittals approved, and then there's a long lead time on materials. That's really just standard. Even when we did the water plant clarifier a few years ago, that was a 10 to 12 month lead time. So just to give you an idea, again, we're talking bringing something to you, and you're not going to see anything for a while. It's not going to be continuous construction of that one. That one's going to be a lot of waiting. So that one, about this time next year, hopefully we're doing the construction of that rehab. Travis Street Booster Station, that was EIC funded. I believe it was discussed yesterday in EIC as well. That is going to allow more development on the 534 segment, so the Shriner property, that Lennar's looking at, and there was some apartments pinging around last year that just allow a lot of that development capacity that we don't have in our current water system. So, any questions on water projects? Okay, go to general fund. So just so you know, I'm trying to make sure I get it. Is that it?
Might be your name. Where you are. Try to move here.
Can you use the mouse on the screen?
No, it's not on the screen.
Oh.
Well, you have that in front of you, so maybe while Martin
Can you
can.
advance us one slide?
Yeah, I touched it, so. Public safety facility, what we're projecting, because this is gonna go into early 2025, about 25.6 million of the 45, that's why that number's on there. That's just fiscal 24 expenses, so that's not the full expenses of what we're at. Currently, we've done all the initial programming confirmation, we've got a schematic that departments have weighed in at, and now they're gonna bring the design to us. We're still in that, if you recall the difference between the public safety facility and the Heritage Center. Heritage Center, we stopped at a 30% design. This one's gonna go all the way to 100% design. And so there's a potential early work package that we'll be discussing with them, depending on what long lead items they come up with once the design commences. Any questions on that one specifically? So, just as a side note, it's not the building, but the wastewater realignment should be wrapping up by the end of this week.
So we should bring that stuff to y'all, next week
He's getting it.
during
At the workshop,
Yeah,
on
so,
the HHHC and the public
There it
safety
is. Thank you,
facility.
Martin.
We'll provide an update.
Westminster Street reconstruction, the segment from what we call phase one is First Street to East Main. The utilities are completed on that. The contractor's working on doing some milling. They actually just had a water line tie-in last week, so they're gonna start milling that out and getting some pavement down here pretty quick. By the end of August, we'll have everything paved out on that section. And at the same time, your utility crew is working on the bottom section from East Main to Lang. So it'll just follow suit. As soon as they're done with that, they're gonna come in and pave that. We're still looking at a late September, early October completion date. So, falls right in our paving window. That will also, if you recall, include the curbs, sidewalk, putting sidewalk on both sides of that street. So, CDBG downtown. So it's kind of like I mentioned with the clarifier, a lot of hurry up and wait. That was awarded to Elecnor with a traffic signal. We've got long lead times, not as long as what we had anticipated. It's got about a 6-month lead time. Basically, what we've talked with the contractor is first part of January 24. They will start working by Francisco's and doing that whole traffic interchange. So that work is only going to take about 2 months, maybe 3, depending on weather. It's a real quick work process, but you just have to get through the procurement phase. So.
Will that whole intersection be closed?
Yes, for a short time, depending on what work is being done. The intent is to dismantle the existing and have stop signs. So we'll have a 4-way, I guess 3 or 4 way stop, however you want to look at it. And for the most part, it's going to be lane closures to where if they have a truck parked, there's still going to be traffic allowed to go around. It may be flaggers, stuff like that. But at the end of the day, when they move out, they're going to have it back open with stop signs. We're trying to have as little impact as possible to folks using Water Street. City Hall garage camera. Julie, is that you?
That's Charby's, and so that's our City Hall and garage security cameras is really old. It's not being supported anymore with the software that we have and just the whole infrastructure related to that we have, and so that was been on Charby's list for a few years, and so we went ahead and put that in. That should be a pretty quick changeover, and we expect it to be less than 100,000. So we put it as an up to, just based on what we know about what the actual system itself is going to cost, and then it'll just be the interface with our software and those kind of things. Getting that done. But that's a pretty important one, and for the for the garage, there's probably not as many cameras in there as there should be, given the amount of volume traffic in there, and then also, of course, City Hall interior and then right exterior. It's what that's going to include, but that's Charby's driving that project. So.
River Trail Downtown, again, another ESC funded project. That is from the library to the downtown pavilion. Right now, we're wrapping up the easement procurement. Hope to put that on the street within the next couple of weeks. Essentially, design is complete. They're just waiting to. We're waiting to release that for bidding once we get all the signatures signed. So look to bring that to you in September to award that contract. Hopefully by the end of 24, calendar year 24, we're open on that short segment. It may take a little bit longer because it is tight back there, but quality contractor can knock it out pretty quick. So facilities master plan, Julie alluded to a lot of that. Just to give you a timeline, I'm actually receiving those today at 3 o'clock. The proposals are due. And we have potential interviews set up for next week, or just at least a time slot allocated. And review committee will look at that, and I believe we're looking at the 22nd, bringing that to you to award a contract for services. So if you have anything on that one, as to, like I said, Julie detailed it quite a bit, but just let me know.
And can you remind me, is that going to be citywide? Are we focusing just on things that involve the general fund?
It'll be citywide, excluding the things that were included in, like, recently when they did the water wastewater master plan. We're not going to revisit those things. If there were some facilities that were included in that, then we'll take a look at those. And there was a couple other exclusions.
So as I say, really the water and wastewater plant are excluded because we looked at those in the master plan.
Mm-hmm.
We added in the 4 fire stations. If you look in the 08 master plan, it said that they were evaluated. Talking to Chief is kind of a head scratcher of where that even existed. There's 19 facilities. Not every, for instance, parks, not every park cabin is going to be looked at. We're only looking at a staff level, the KSP office, and then the parks admin office out at KSP, and parks maintenance at the yard. As far as water, wastewater, we're looking at the UTC building. Actually, that might be the only one we have for him. And then streets building, some of the antiquated systems we had. Julie mentioned this building. This is going on 11 years now, and we have not had anything looked at, and so we want to make sure we look at those. But there's 19 facilities spread across general fund and water sewer. Comp plan.
Yeah, the comp plan update, so that was actually in the 23 original budget, and I think just based on some direction priorities that we've received, we were going to start that this year. We're pushing that over 24, just given everything, some changes that we've been through. When we get a new city manager on board, then we'll get more direction, and then that person can communicate with you guys to give final direction on that. So that budget number is an estimate, just based on, what we saw happen the first time. We don't anticipate this being a full-blown restructure of what's already worked, but it's working through, where we are, what we still need to do, updating based on new priorities, new things that have come up in the past 5 years, but just making sure we're keeping that comp plan alive. And for those of you who don't know, we do have a software that Guillermo kind of manages, that everyone who has a Kerbal 2050 item assigned to us, and most of us have at least 5 or more, and so we go in and update where we are with each action item, what's happening, is it complete, what we need to do, is there a cost associated with it, and so we have an ongoing process of tracking where we are with Kerbal 2050. So I think that update will be part of that, but that will really be at council's direction, regards with, our admin team to decide what that really is gonna look like, but we wanted to make sure that there was, funding allocated for
Yeah, that's, I'm a little surprised by that amount. It seems like it's
Well,
pretty excessive.
We used some outside companies last time, if council decides we're gonna do it internally, well, that number looks completely different.
Okay.
So like I said, we really didn't have a good estimate on what that was gonna cost. So we just kind of plugged based on, what we spent the last time, knowing that's gonna be completely different. So understand, these are, most time, and we'll say they're estimates unless we know they're not. If we don't spend it, then it'll just become part of fund balance. We just wanted to make sure there was some allocation there, so that depending on what direction we were given, it wasn't something we had to go back and rebudget or something like that. So if we don't need it, then we won't use it. That's just earmarked for that. So it's not like coming out of general fund, anything like that. It's set aside from last year that we already had designated, and we're just gonna roll that forward.
Okay.
Until we have other direction.
And I think this is from y'all's direction during the retreat, this wasn't necessarily a high priority item, but we didn't want it to fall off. And so I think it'll probably just continue to be here until time comes when it's like we need to revisit certain portions of that that have changed.
Okay.
And that could look however you want it to look.
Yeah.
We just- And so in the event that we don't need it, then we won't use it. It'll just go back into, now it will stay in the CIP fund. It'll just be used for something else. So that, and if you would like us to change that number now, I'm happy to change it. We just went off of, again, the unknown. We just don't know.
Yeah.
So I mean,
No, I'm
very
okay with it.
comfortable changing it.
Yeah. I'm okay with it like it is.
Okay. I mean, we can bring it to 100,000, we can bring, it's just, we
Yeah.
didn't really know, and just based on prior conversations and then historical, what we did the first time, we wanted to make sure there was some dollars there.
Okay.
If and when it does become something y'all wanna consider, we'll bring you several options.
Sure.
On, here's the scales that we could do internally with
Right.
staff,
Yeah.
Okay.
to the full-blown, we have somebody come in and we
Just
do
say that.
a mini version.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely, that can look however you want it to look, we just really didn't, we don't have any, solid direction on that. And once we do, then we can change
Okay.
that, it'll just move back into undesignated for future projects, if that's your direction.
And it's important to keep it there and in front of us.
We
so.
just don't want it to fall off, because, part of the commitment with the process we went through for Kerbal 2050 is that's the direction the city wants to go, that's mostly what citizens, gave us, was top priorities, and what progress are we making, how does that look, what can we check the box that we've completed, what needs to be updated based on things that have changed, those kind of things, so that can look however you want it to look.
Okay.
Michael, you
Michael,
wanna-
I'll let you look at that.
Talk about the airport?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I'm excited to do that. So there is 56 acres that is southeast of the airport. It's the property adjacent to it. And the airport is looking at purchasing, it's a larger tract, but they're looking at purchasing just the acreage that would give them the ability to continue their runway. And their estimate on that is 700,000. And so it would be 350 from the city and 350 from the county. Now, the airport has told us that TxDOT would reimburse this up to 90%, but we haven't had that verified in writing from TxDOT that that's going to happen. So it's always that's kind of a mixed bag, but this is sort of a one-off opportunity. So the property is just sold, and the new owners are letting the airport go through their due diligence process to check out the property. And that's the cost estimate for that piece of land would be that. So this would be for future build out. They can't go the other way on the runway because that ditch on the other side over on Al Mooney Road. So this is sort of the direction that would go.
Are they expecting bigger planes to land here in Kerrville?
I don't know that it would be bigger planes, because some pretty big planes can actually land in Kerrville. But I think it offers some more opportunities if there's a larger runway. It gives them a little bit more space for some additional build out. That would probably change the scope of the road and the request, so the county is, we've been talking to the county about, what that would look like, just preliminarily. So that road would basically push out past that property and then kind of, it'd do the same iteration, just a little bit further down. So that is their capital request. They had several others. They had county budget discussion talks, earlier this week, and the county recommended to fund the potential land acquisition, but that they use their fund balance for any of the remaining smaller capital CIP requests. They have a thing called AWAS, and if you make me explain it, I'm gonna fail. But it's it deals with the flight communications, I believe. And so they said they didn't want to fund those out of their budget, but that they would be okay if airport used their fund balance to get down to, I think, 25% was kind of they don't have a target fund balance or reserve, but nobody wanted to go lower than 25%. But prior to me getting here, I know that the discussions to EIC or to the airport was to drive down your fund balance. If you want to do new projects, drive down, use your own fund balance for it. And so they're continuing to do that. We had a crosswind runway project that's going on right now, where in our previous budget, we had said we would do in-kind services, and the county would match it with their cash. And so we're doing we're doing a 50-50 split with in-kind services and a little bit of cash, but we're also making them use down their fund balance as a part of that. So we're staying equitable with our 50-50 split with the county, and if we were to continue to do so, the request would be to fund this acquisition as the one CIP project for the airport.
And I did do some reading on the TxDOT's land acquisition program. It is a 90-10 reimbursement program should the airport qualify. And so I think that they're looking at that obviously as the reimbursement. So if they were to qualify and then to be approved for that, then essentially we would, 90% of that would come back to us. Now what that time period is, I don't know. But I know that, it's super early, but again, we're a little bit different than the county is we have the possibility of a budget amendment later. So if this, for whatever reason, we hadn't budgeted this and this actually came to fruition, then the airport could come and ask us through a budget amendment. The county does not. And so one of the things we've really tried to be super consistent about is having conversations with the county auditor and with their airport liaison every year to make sure we're budgeting what they're budgeting, because if we're budgeting something that they're not and vice versa, then the project can't be completed regardless. So, our thought was if this doesn't happen, and the decision can be made that this has been earmarked for the airport already, do we want to leave that as it's been earmarked, so we leave it for future projects? That way it's already earmarked and we're not having to make a bigger transfer somewhere else. Do we want to return it to fund balance? What do we want to do? And we can talk about that if this doesn't come through, because it's so early. But that's one of their big priorities right now, and that program does exist through TxDOT, so we want them to not lose out on
How do we
funding.
find out whether this project qualifies? How do we find that out?
Well, we don't even know that it's going to happen. It's so early that Mary is working with TxDOT, and she has a contact over there. And I just did some reading on it, just as Michael said, because we didn't have anything already in writing, because the project they haven't, I guess, sealed the deal on property. So until that happens, then they can't apply for that reimbursement. And I mean, it's pretty.
Just about everything they would
pretty
do
wide
would
open.
qualify,
Yeah.
but it's the devil's in the details,
Yes.
right? And so trying to get TxDOT to give you an answer that's definitive is a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, they won't until we have more of a deal done.
Okay.
And so definitely more to come on that, but that it is called the TxDOT Land Acquisition Program specifically for airports. So
Now, what I will say is we did do an in-kind contribution as a part of the budget last year for this. That has been extremely problematic. And so we have an agreement to fund 50%. I can tell you that staff they won't come anymore. They just make me go deal with this in-kind discussion, because it's just, there's an agreement for a 50-50 contribution. And so when we were planning for like a crosswind runway expansion project that's gonna happen 6 months, 8 months later, you don't know exactly what all those cost estimates are gonna be. And so you put those in-kind services in there, and then it creates an imbalance, and it can. So I think it would be beneficial for us to do the in-kind services and then save on the cash costs, but to budget for the equity split between the county. And where we can have efficiencies, we will certainly do that. But to only fund it through the intention was really
The intention
good.
was really good,
Yeah.
and we don't bid those kind of services, that's not what we do, and so it was a really difficult process.
If you all make us do it, we will happily do it.
Speak for yourself.
Well, and I would encourage us that we support this. This is a great opportunity for the airport, and if they don't, I mean, if they don't get this land now, there's no land whatsoever for them to ever expand.
It has the commercial component, the commercial possibilities for them as well, and with the land acquisition. It just further, if that road is pushed out, they'll have additional opportunities for more commercial expansion out there. And the hope would be that, you know, you want the revenue from the airport to sustain itself, but without commercial, you know, buildings out there as their tenants, they're always gonna rely, I mean, they will always rely on us for some of this stuff, but it's a good opportunity.
And I'll say that in the last several years, from an operational side, the airport has been self-sustaining. We haven't had to transfer money other than our annual 25,000 that it's our ramp portion, and we have to do that for the TxDOT to give them their portion. It's just a matching contribution. But outside of that, they have been self-supporting on operations, and their budget for fiscal year '24, we'll be bringing to you on the 25th. It's self-supporting, so this is their only request, and so.
Bare bones.
Yeah, I mean, it's very reasonable, there's no big surprises in their operating budget, you know, and like I said, they've been managing it, and supporting themselves in their operational standpoint, it's just from what their revenues are, and ours the same, I mean, we issue debt, why? Because our regular operating revenues can't support some of our bigger stuff that we have to do, and so, same kind of concept, so they phone a friend, and they need, some things, and so we own half of that, so we need to maintain it.
Their airport layout plan that they're going through right now with TxDOT will modify kind of the boundaries and give some more flexibility on the properties they own on the outside of the fence. So right now they kind of have to all be aviation use, which really limits who can go out there. So we've been trying to get UPS to get off of our property, that they have a lease with us on the property that's right next to fire station, which is problematic for a lot of reasons. It's not really a building. And there's a spot out there for them. There's other interest from aviation users, and without there being a whole lot of certainty, their corporate structures, the UPS is gonna be like, well, if I can't get a 10-year lease with 2 5-year options, I don't really wanna relocate and spend the capital money to be out there. And so that change in the airport layout plan is gonna make that a whole lot easier. And Gil's also got some folks interested in coming out there as well. So hopefully they'll just keep adding to their revenue stream.
Any other project questions?
Is this with the assumption that are we putting this in our budget with the assumption that we will be reimbursed, or no?
No.
Okay.
The 350
So-
would be our contribution if we were not reimbursed. And we have to front the money anyway, so we wanna budget it as if we're gonna spend it.
Right.
And then, should we be reimbursed, then,
I guess I should word it differently, because the 350 I understand is our part of it.
Yeah.
Are we doing it, I guess, with a condition? Are we saying that this is gonna be in the budget with the condition that we will be reimbursed? No, okay.
because there's no certainty of that. I mean, TxDOT programs, in my experience, have been very good. TxDOT really supports the aviation industry as general. I mean, they pay for 90% of their runway, and what was a $1.3 million project, and our part is $90,000 or something, and TxDOT's assuming the rest. So I would say that if there's a program out there and it will fit into what we're trying to do here with the airport, then Mary does her homework on those kind of grant applications and stuff, the possibility is good that we would get reimbursed, but we don't have anything in writing from TxDOT. So to say that we would build it in as a condition, I think would be very limiting, because first of all, we might not know until after the property's, I don't know what the text dot process
No,
looks
that's
like.
fine.
So, you know, our thought was, do we want to front them the money to go purchase this property or not?
Our recommendation is to
so-
purchase it
yeah.
absent a reimbursement from
Yes.
TxDOT. And
The
we will-
reimbursement's a
we will
bonus.
certainly just drill TxDOT and continue to ask until hopefully we can find an answer very quickly, but our recommendation is to include it in the budget, without that.
And what's the ultimate, I guess, goal for the additional runway? And I guess I'm trying to figure out, do they not have adequate space right now? Are they looking to add hangars? What are we looking for? Or is it just a project that they're trying to do for something later down the road that we don't know of yet?
So this would be, they have limitations out there on their property. They have, they're constrained by their location, right? You have the neighborhood surrounding it, you have the highway on the other side, and you have the ditch behind them, so their only chance for expansion is to go this way. And it is an effort to have future build out, to
Okay.
add additional hangar space, to add additional corporate space that would be out there. A real good place for new commercial space as well, because you have 27 right there, you've got the industrial park on the other side of the road. So it's a combination of both of those things. They have a waiting list of 60 planes, something like that, for hangar space. And the folks that are out there right now that want to expand, they have limited options for where they can do it. And so for them to build out in the future, this would be an opportunity for that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And runway.
And runway landing, it's always the same. Yeah, the more runway you have, the better it is.
Brenda's question. A big plane can land there, they just can't take off.
Yeah.
And the county has been open to this, right? To their
Yes.
share.
Yes.
Yes, and we're really trying to do our best to align with what they're doing and have those conversations early, because there's no point in us doing something that they're not gonna do, or vice versa.
Yeah, that's the
because
hard part.
then we're allocating dollars that are gonna be allocated and not used. So then you're kind of in a no-win situation. But I think it's an opportunity, you know, just to, on your question, Roman, was just, it's an opportunity that if that goes a different way, that opportunity's gone. And so you're kind of, you're finished as far as airport future expansion, it's just over. Because that's the only, if you really look at that even from an aerial, there's nowhere else to go as far as expansion over there. I think that was why our biggest recommendation is just kind of grab an opportunity when it's here. And, you know, as I said, TxDOT has been super supportive of the aviation industry in general, so if it's an eligible project, then the reimbursement would be a nice bonus.
And we'll speak to that at the
Absolutely.
budget discussion next meeting as well.
We're bringing the airport budget to you on the 25th operation, but we wanted this, to be able to have this kind of discussion instead of just presentation and
A chance to polish that gem we have out there, so.
I know we're still at the rough stages, but one last thing I want to clarify is when we're looking at these projects, we have different estimates here in the presentation and on the document here. And just for example, like in the general capital projects, I think there's like a about $3.5 million difference. So just to make sure I'm at least wrapping my head around what we're being expected of, are we more on the $28 million side for these, or should we be following what's on the presentation or what's on this document?
So this document here is gonna be aligned once it goes into the budget book. So what you have to keep in mind is, first of all, when we did this, it was last week, things have happened since then, we're working. So this gets updated every month for us internally. So when we actually put this into a filed proposed budget, it's gonna be firmed up with where we really feel like we're gonna land as far as completion of ongoing projects in 23, so the 24 part will be updated. So for example, public safety facility, we might spend $15 million between now and the end of September, we don't know. So it's really hard to say. So to answer your question, it's two people working on the same project.
Okay.
So when I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it as a total project, and Trina's looking at it on this big spreadsheet as, well, I know where we are right now today through the end of June and what we've spent, so I'm gonna push that forward. And so it's kind of this is a living forecast, just like everything else we work on. This is just an estimate based on what I know the total projects are and the portion I think that we will probably spend in 24 at the time I did this, which was a week and a half ago. So it's ongoing, to answer your question. By the time it is filed, this is gonna be your baby, right here, this is what we'll go by.
I think the bigger picture for projects is as long as we're maintaining and staying within the budget we set for those projects, dependent, no matter when the expenses actually happen, is the bigger picture.
And I think that's one reason why in the budget book, when you see these long-term plans, you know, you may see a project that's coming on board and it may have a $2 million estimated expense, it may not happen at all, because something might happen, and so, but at the end of the day, if we're gonna exceed that budget, is when we're gonna come back and have a different discussion about, like, as Kyle said, we're, you know, taking money from one project to pull to another, because 2 years ago, Westminster looked like a completely different animal than it does now, and so, anytime we're going to work outside of the total budget is when we're coming back, but the idea with CIP is it is rolling, and so the total project is what the total project is, if that answers your question. What we spend in each given year, that's why your CIP budget is completely separate than your operating budget, because we don't know.
For the big one, for public safety, as we get further into it, we were at 100% construction documents.
Right.
We'll have a pretty refined schedule, but even that will have some deviations on the supply chain. But that one should be pretty solid once we get to that point.
Same with the water. I mean, once we have contracts issued and schedules done, then it's a lot easier to say what we think we're gonna spend. Any other CIP questions? I know this is a big conversation. There's a lot of moving parts. Okay. Moving on, so we have a few other funds I just wanted to go over kind of quickly. So we talk about hotel occupancy tax fund. So the first thing I want to do is just give you an update. So at the beginning of fiscal year 23, you can see our fund balance there right at $2 million. That's a pretty healthy fund balance for an occupancy tax fund. Revenue, we budgeted 1.9 million in occupancy tax in 2023. We are not going to hit that, and we talk about this each month in council meetings. We're, again, as I said in sales tax yesterday, we're well ahead of where we were in 2019, 2020, but we had a few really big years there. A lot of that was COVID driven and some other things, and with the economy right now, you know, people they're not traveling as much. However, we're still exceeding what we're going to call our normal. So I don't really think it's bad. It's just a difficult one to project unless things are just really rolling constantly. I expect we're going to miss 2023's by about $250,000. That's my guess right now. I could be wrong. You know, it's difficult to estimate. So we'll continue to bring you those every month when we bring financial updates and just let you know where this is going. The biggest reason this one's important is for a couple reasons. So we have the $1 million commitment to HHHC. That was originally budgeted in 22, so that'll roll over into 24 until council gives us another direction. But that is earmarked for that project, and that is actually budgeted within the library fund. So when the time comes, then that money would be transferred out to cover that project. For right now, it's still sitting in here, but earmarked for that. I budgeted fiscal year 24, 4% over where I think 2023 is going to end. Now, that could change a little bit in the next few weeks once we kind of finalize what what July's going to look like before we actually bring you a proposed budget for 2024 on August 8th. You can see at the bottom just a hot revenue monthly comparison, and this is for multi-years. The main reason we've done this is to really kind of show you what the impact was to COVID closures, but then also post or during COVID travel and what that did for us on the revenue side, especially in 2021 and 2022. And then the dark green there is year-to-date 2023, and then the red is my estimate for 2023. So you can see the drop there in 2023. We continue to talk to CVB and their communications with hoteliers and just, you know, what's going on, you know, working with just the industry as a whole to kind of see. And I think the economy's driving a lot of this. We're seeing a little bit of uptick, but you don't know. It's hard to predict what people are going to do. On the right there, you can see year over year occupancy tax. That's annual revenue. So, I mean, clearly, you know, we're well above where we were, you know, 3 years ago. But we are somewhat declining in what this year's estimate's going to be. So we were pretty conservative in next year. I'm just saying, you know, let's take consideration things like, you know, more movement next year, hopefully. We also, you know, have something called solar eclipse that's going to have a little bit of impact on there. Just keep in mind, as we've talked about through our eclipse planning, that things like sales tax and hotel occupancy tax, those have to be huge gross revenue changes in order for our impact to be big. So 7%, of $100,000 additional revenue to hoteliers is not a huge impact to the city. Same with sales tax. If we have $1 million in extra sales, 1% of that is super small. So when we're talking about impacts of additional revenue within the community, you have to look at it that way as far as what our piece of it. So regardless of what's happening for the retailers, and we want that to happen for them, is the impact to the city is pretty small. It's got to be pretty significant to have a big impact there. So just wanted to give you that kind of as a precursor
On the,
conversation
on
for
the-
24.
Just a question.
Yes.
On the $1 million commitment to HHHC, is that amount gonna cover the actual expense that it's gonna take to get that open?
I don't have any idea on that project. I know that from this fund what's
No.
committed. I know from
No is
Library
the answer to
Memorial
that.
what's committed.
No, that's just a portion of
Yeah.
the funds that have been committed. We have a discussion actually later this afternoon with the Marksman team on what they've uncovered. So we're hopeful that they come back to us with, hey, this is great news. The project still has a gap, even if that's the case. And so we're working on ways to bring that back to y'all to consider funding mechanisms to cover that.
Yeah,
But right now it
because-
has a $3.25 million budget, with about $400,000 in contingency, about $500,000 in reserve for future maintenance, and then HHHC has $1 million for the FF&E, sorry, fixtures, furniture, and equipment. So the budget is $5 million.
And that was done back 2017, 2019 timeframe.
Yeah, so we're not there yet, but we'll have more answers for you by the 25th meeting. So we'll have an update on HHAC and public safety for the 25th.
Okay, and that brings me to my next question, which is the CALO and the repair of the roof. Because I found out that that building was gifted to the city back in the 60s, okay? And I do consider it a valuable asset because of what it brings in the way of just diversity for people coming into that building and utilizing it and all the events that go on there. Kind of like the HHHC is going to do with another building that, again, was gifted to the city. But I'm concerned about it becoming an anchor around our neck because we're not able to keep up with the maintenance or the expenditures associated with getting those assets either usable or retainable, okay? And I know that I have been on the board for Playhouse 2000 now for 3 years. And the big issue that keeps coming back to me is that they really have been asking for roof replacement or repair for 8 years. And how do we finally get money budgeted for that? Because it is part of hot funds, and it does generate hot funds. The use of those buildings will generate hot funds. So how do we find, I'm looking at this, and it's still under, TBD for 23, 24, 25, when are we, because what we're running into now is with VK Garage, we had the same issue with HVAC failing, people walking out of performances because of the failure of the HVAC system. So what the board did was they took money out of board designated savings, and we're getting it replaced and we're getting it repaired because it is an asset to the community, and it's being used by the community on a daily basis. Now the CALU, as beautiful as it is, it's failing. And we're looking at having to either close it or make those repairs so that it can continue to be a community asset for Kerrville. So I wanna find out when we're gonna get it on the schedule to either be replaced, or do we need to look at selling it? Can we not maintain it adequately, and do we need to sell that asset?
Well, one thing we have been doing is we tried to go through insurance at one point, about probably 8 years ago.
Yes.
It was denied based upon maintenance issues, continued maintenance, that we weren't doing the continued maintenance. That was
Okay,
what
so
the,
they
that was what the adjuster said. The city wasn't doing the maintenance that needed to be done. So that's why it was failing. So we did some repairs, and we've done repairs multiple years. And now we're at the point where repairs aren't gonna work.
Right.
We have to do a total replacement.
So as you all remember, last year, was it Vince? Last year, yeah, I was here. It was pretty early on, but Peter Lewis and his team came in and did a cost estimate on that. And to do it, you know, we came back with a number that was really high, right? It was $3 million. And so we looked at, are there ways for us to do phased approaches to it? And they came up with some scenarios. Now you lose out on the economies of scale when you have to remobilize and come back, you know, do 1 year, do this portion 2, portion 3. But that was an amount that was in excess of what we could withstand in the budget. However, you all discussed quality of life projects at the retreat being a high priority, and so I think what we as staff intend to do is to get both you all and the EIC together for a discussion about potential for revenue bond consideration, if y'all are amenable to that, and to work through several quality of life projects. And I think the top 4 that we discussed were the golf course, the aquatics, the Calu Theater, and HHHC. And so we have preliminary discussions with our financial advisors about what the capacity is for EIC on a sales tax revenue option. And so we want to bring them back to y'all to discuss that. And so we certainly understand that. Spoke with Jeffrey Brown about those concerns, and well documented. So I think that's where we are with that. From a staff standpoint, we know that's a high dollar number. If we broke it out, if we had to break it out into 3 years, it'd probably be just about $1 million per year. And there's ways to do it in a phased approach. One of the concerns from the theater is they have shows. And my discussion with him was, well, part of it's you got to rip off the Band-Aid. And we can work through those phases the best we can and try to work within some of your limits, but from the engineering standpoint, there's going to be some times where we say, well, no, we can't say we would close down for this, this, and this, because it's an active construction site. But as Mr. Brown told me, he said New York City is constantly under construction, and they're still open for business. So I said, yes, sir, it is. So anyway, I say all that to say that, you know, I think we have some stuff to bring forward to you all to consider.
Okay, so how do we get that discussion started? Do we?
I'm meeting with Kim, EIC.
Okay.
I believe we're meeting next week.
To discuss a date for you all, to discuss a joint meeting on when you all could get together.
Okay.
We had a joint meeting last year that was pretty productive, if I remember right, or year before last, where we were all in this room. I think that's kind of the intent again, and I'm not sure if this is a question or just for clarification, but the hot dollars do have restrictions on construction versus support of operations, and so there's some pretty strict guidelines on what you can utilize hot dollars for, even if we had enough, which clearly we don't.
Right.
Even if we had enough, as far as what you can and cannot use for construction type purposes, and so that's a whole other conversation, but the law is pretty specific on convention, tourism, arts, you know, what can you and can't do, and so
Right.
We can look into that, certainly, we look at it all the time, we're looking at it for some other reasons right now, but, our hot fund couldn't support that, even if that was something that, council.
There is
Yeah, so that's-
100,000 allocated for
That's correct, for maintenance every year to
maintenance
Playhouse
over there at
Okay.
Playhouse 2000 each year.
Because if we don't do something about that roof,
Right.
then we're looking at a mold issue, and we may not be able to recover from a mold issue.
No, it needs to be addressed now.
Okay.
That's-
And it is a topic of conversation,
Okay.
with staff all the time, so.
Yeah, we talked about it last night at EIC
Okay.
briefly. They did show us, Trina prepared a nice spreadsheet of future revenues and future expenses and planned projects. And there was some discussion last night about revenue, sales tax revenue bonds or something to that effect.
Okay.
The mayor did come and speak to the EIC about quality of life projects. Kim Clarkson, obviously, the new president of the EIC, is aware of what we've been talking about.
Okay.
I think the wheels are in motion, they just move slowly.
I think we just want to get the temperature from the entire board, consensus from you all, if that's the
Yeah, I agree. I don't know
way
what,
that you want to
That would
move
be the way
forward.
to fund it.
And so, I think what we've asked Ashley to do, because predominantly, most of these projects on the city side for our assets are gonna come through Parks and Recreation. In addition to the known projects that we've discussed, or, what are some of the other priority ranked list projects that you have for y'all to consider? We obviously have, she'll have a ranking. A lot of that's based on the Parks and Rec Board recommendations, but if you gave Ashley an unlimited amount of money, she would find a way to spend it on those projects, because there's more projects than we have, we'll have cash for anyway.
Right.
But, so we'll have a triage list, I suppose.
So, Kim, you said a while ago that y'all went back 8 years ago, you had your adjuster up?
Well, I don't know if it was 8 years, but it was.
How many-
it's been a few
How
times.
many significant hailstorms have we had since then?
Oh, I know.
So maybe it would be worth saying, heck, we just had one a couple weeks ago. Maybe we're saying, hey, we might have hail damage on this roof now, for another way to look at it.
There's a couple of areas in there where you step on that roof and you're reluctant to put 2 feet onto it, which wouldn't fall into that category, but
Right.
yes, I mean, we
I mean,
had.
I've gotta replace every HVAC at the bank because it has hail damage to it. All the fins are bent over, they're broken, so, that's a $30,000 deductible for the bank by itself. But it's hail damage. I mean, the adjuster came out and said, your roof is shut.
But
Metal-
is it already documented that,
Well, that's gonna be the question.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
Well, repairs are documented, yes.
no, I'm talking about, is it already documented that, have we tried to file a claim in the past and been denied because we haven't, done
Maintained.
proper maintenance on the,
Yes, that was.
The larger scheme of it, yes, I think that would be our problem is.
It probably doesn't hurt to give it a try and a conversation, but, the other thing that needs to be a part of all of this is the ongoing. I mean, that's why we're in this situation, is because,
right.
the long range, hey, 100,000 doesn't take care of things a year. So that needs to also be part of what we're looking at.
And on the HHC thing, part of the funds allocated are for maintenance of the facility.
That's
I
right.
mean, they're not being used for the current construction.
Yeah.
They're designated to help keep that thing afloat. I mean, the physical plant.
right.
One thing I was gonna point out, circle back to CIP just for a minute on that same topic, is within the CIP transfer this year, both water and general fund, what we've kind of talked through with our asset team, that we continue to talk about, is having a designated line item within CIP, kind of as we do for streets maintenance carryover, to where we designate a certain number of dollars each year to build up some balance in there. Not that it would cover a $3.5 million need, but, we talk about, this building that we're in, if there were a major break or something that needed to be replaced, that we have a place to go for that. And I think that's gonna take time, and again, I think, it's easy to say we need to do that. The bigger question is always, well, what can the general fund support, and what is, council's, kind of direction on, that those are property tax dollars, and so, you don't wanna increase property tax, I mean, that's, well, but at the same time, if we wanna have assets, we have to take care of them, and some of that is having a set aside, and that's a lot of what we've been talking about through this asset process is, if we buy something, or we gain something, or it's gifted to us, or whatever the situation may be, we have to maintain that, and so if we're not gonna accept that responsibility, then at some point, we've gotta decide what is the level of service, that the council would like for us to provide, because, If we don't maintain it, then we're gonna be right back in the same situation. And
Exactly.
so, we're having some really deep conversations about that internally, as we've talked about, but you will see that within the final CIP budget, and Trina may have already outlined it on here just as a line item, that for now, the intent is not to set up a separate fund, for accounting reasons, but we'll address it as we do anything else, sidewalk improvements, those kind of things, to where we designate X each year to start, building something going forward. It's gonna take time unless someone says, we want to put X. That's great, but we're gonna have to decide how that gets funded and how we do that. And I think that's, not to, either point fingers or call it anything but reality, is that, when you've gotta know where the money's gonna come from. And at the end of the day, especially general fund revenue, water fund revenue, it's limited. And so what you do with that and how you allocate it is important, and you see the here and now, but it's a lot harder to say, we're gonna put this over there and it has to be part of our ongoing expense, even though nothing might be happening with it right now. So that's a lot harder sometimes for people to swallow, that we're putting money there that's not being used. Meanwhile, it has effects on rates and it has effects on taxes and other kind of things. But I think it's just a matter of, we have to take care of the assets that we have. And so you will see that designated. There's gonna be a lot more conversation on that, and depending on council's direction as far as what that number looks like and what we can get that number to, what's the goal at the end of the day. And I think Michael and I've had conversations on public safety facility, same kind of thing. We've got to do a set aside going forward, because it's a brand new building today, but things happen. And so we know that our annual operating budget cannot, it can't support that. And it's not unusual to issue debt to take care of some things, but at the same time, that can't be the answer to everything. We've got to do some internal planning too,
Right.
so that it's a combination kind of effort to get that done. So some common sense has to come in to play whenever you're doing, long-range planning and budgeting.
Yeah, we don't wanna
Things cost
show
money.
up with a $3 million bill for the building and not have an answer, and that's what happened with the Cali, right? So we wanna be able to say that you all have cash for this, or you need to buy a new fire truck, or you need to do whatever this is, that we've got at least portions of that set aside, and your budgets are level, is steady. If we can getting away from wild swings where you gotta have purchases because of emergencies, it is harder, but it's a good concept. Keeps your budgets as level as you can get.
Yes, and that was kind of the idea. We've talked about leveling the operational budget and really planning for everything else in a long-range plan somehow, and doing a set aside so that we're building some balance. So
Well, I think to that, Councilmember Hughes brought up a great point with the CALU. I mean, that's money that we're constantly having to figure out how we're gonna budget for every year, and I think the whole conversation really is around being mindful of what we are acquiring, because that's always gonna require maintenance. CALU is a perfect example that you brought up. When we acquired the Shriner House, that was proposed and estimated to be, if I remember correctly, little to almost nothing from the city's part. It's in the minutes and everything when we were acquiring it. It was gonna be almost nothing. And that's another example, and then we have our sports complex. That's almost $1 million every year without direct revenue from it. And so I think the bottom line is we need to figure out what can we sustain within our budget, and is there anything that we can let go of if we're not getting direct revenue from it. If we let go of something, and let's say the revenue that we're estimating is from sales tax or hot tax, we don't have to be in control of that for us to still receive the hot tax and the sales tax from that. So I think we really need to look at what do we have on the books.
Keeps on giving, that's what we call it.
Yeah. The gifts
We
that
said
keep
the same thing.
Well,
Exactly.
Right.
Discussions about revenue bonds and quality of life projects that we're coming to you with, there's a few of them that aren't current assets that we already maintain, so they wouldn't have additional, we're not trying to add, needing more staff to cover this, or need more staff to do this. That was a big proponent of the things that we know we need to revamp, over 20 years, that it's gonna have a 20-year lifespan, that we already maintain. And we can continue to maintain at the current staffing levels and service levels. That was
It sounds
a
like
large
we-
part of it.
It sounds like we need a workshop just to discuss those and to map out a plan for those particular quality of life issues and assets. And, like for instance, and this is not a quality of life thing, but when when municipal court moves to the new public facilities building, what are we gonna do with that asset on McFarland? What are we doing with it? And could we sell that to offset maybe some of the expenses we have with our quality of life issues?
Sell it, put it on the tax rolls.
I think each asset that kind of will have a new opportunity, we will suss out as many options for you as, you know, come available.
Yeah.
Not the first of which being putting these things back in the tax rolls because they don't serve our purpose, nor do we want to maintain them any longer. And you know, there'll be some considerations for other than that on a few of these, but you know, we've got requests already about the public safety facility, or the public safety building, the current one, the police station. And so, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's-
okay.
I'm gonna put chicken joint there.
Don't even. There's a new nail salon coming up.
Next.
Thank you.
Stop eating chicken, stop getting your nails done, stop building.
Yes. Okay, so, moving through the rest of occupancy tax, I know that kind of got off, but some good discussion there on things that we talk through on a regular basis internally, and definitely some things we need to bring as a group, and that's in the plans. So, so looking at, on the expense side for '24, so CVB, obviously, we are their supporter, and I think that you guys have been to several of Julie's presentations, and then are probably coming up for luncheon tomorrow, which is going to bring more discussion about detail level of her budget. And Julie's here today if you have any specific questions for her. But basically the 1.36 million you see right there is two components. So the 1.1 is actually the CVB's portion, so that's their operating dollars. That does come directly out of HOT, and that is one of the top allowable expenses to use for occupancy tax funds, because their primary purpose is to bring tourism into the city. Their estimated 23 is 3% over their 23 budget for 24, which in our opinion is very reasonable, looking at their line items, in which you will see in your council packet for the 25th, I believe. I'll double check on that, but I believe it's on the 25th. But you can be able to see their line item detail, but very conservative. They're seeing the same kind of increase as we are. Of course, they saw a bigger increase last year as we did, so some leveling on their side too. So didn't feel like anything was really out of line within that request. But within that 1.36 is that new community arts program that Megan's been talking to you guys about. It's $225,000 obligation for fiscal year '24. That was kind of the original budget that was put out there in the preliminary stages as far as what CVB was going to allocate to get that program started, and then an annual budget with the understanding that a portion of that would be funded by HOT each year, with their intent to go out and find other revenue sources as that grows, and then also to fill the gap as the Community Foundation 3-year commitment falls off. So the bullet there about the $100,000 contributed from the Community Foundation, that's the first year of grant funding that the Community Foundation.
And they're gonna do that 3 years?
It's 3 years in scale, and is that 100,000 right? I'm second guessing myself. I think it's 150. I'll get back with you on that. 150. It's 150 the first
150?
year. Yeah, that's my mistake. It's 150 the first year, and then it drops after that. But so that's a 3-year commitment on their part to help with the startup of that program, and then as the community arts program gets going, then they'll be seeking other funding as well to support their future needs. So the idea there was to really have something dedicated to arts within the community, both from a marketing and advertising standpoint, as they've always done, but then growing that, as Megan's talked to you about through presentations. And I know there's, other grant possibilities out there as well, but so that, just so that there's clarification that full 1.36 is not directly for operational for CVB. Any questions on CVB in general? I know, you guys have been seeing a lot of presentations from them, and we'll see another one tomorrow, but if you have something specific, we can ask you. Okay. Other things that are funded and historically have been funded out of here for special events, Fourth on the River. So that's typically been funded at $25,000. That has never changed in the history that I could find over many years. there's been a lot of things that have changed in their organization, and also from an expense standpoint for that event, it continues to grow, be successful. Their reporting shows that we're drawing more and more people from outside of our area, so they use a cell phone ping system to see who's in the park, how many are in the park, and where those people are coming from. So continues to draw more people. They have requested that we increase that budget to 50,000. That is a staff recommendation just based on what they are contributing. I've seen full financial reports, and I will say that it supports it with what they're doing in the direction they're trying to go.
That was going to be my question, was have we seen that?
I have,
expense
and they are very
report?
good about providing quick follow-ups. I haven't seen this year's report, but they provide that to us typically within 30 days, but always by the deadline, with what.
Who's they?
request.
The
That
committee?
Work on the River, so yes, so their
Okay.
committee provides us with, before, a full organizational budget, a full event budget, a full revenue stream source, a full expense, summary of where they're spending money, also, head counts based on cell phone records, and then also geographical locations, as good as those records can be for where people are coming in from. And so we're seeing a farther reach, we're seeing larger attendance, and I'll be able to give you an update on that when they get this year's report to us, which should be pretty soon. But
Julie, did you keep any kind of data on the KFOR event as far as head count goes?
Oh, sorry, I was like, so my cell phone data runs about 5 to 6 weeks behind, so July 4th data is not
Okay.
available for this year.
Because, I mean, I heard that we had 17,000 people at that event.
Julie, can you go to
can
the
you,
podium?
Sure.
because they can record you here.
Yeah.
So the visitation data platform that we use runs about 5 to 6 weeks behind, because they aggregate that data, they throw out outliers, they've got their whole science behind it, so I don't have July 4th
Okay.
data specifically. I don't know who said there were 17,000 people down in the park, so I would definitely not be able to speak to that.
Right.
As far as hot tax, we have 1,047 rooms. We can only sell 1,047 rooms,
Yeah.
whether there's 17,000 people or 1,047 people. So that's the other thing to look at is, to me, I would love to see the data on.
Yeah, I'm curious about the data.
On their end,
Yeah.
can they show that it was out of towner, but did they stay in market or did they go somewhere else? Of course, we also have the short-term rentals, and those are
Right.
not included in that 1,047
Okay.
number. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah,
Other than I can't verify that number
Right.
at all.
I was just, that's the number that I heard. In fact, it may have even been referenced in the paper, if I'm not mistaken, but I might be.
Yeah.
But I thought that was high.
I don't know if we were sold out. Typically, my pulse on whether or not we're sold out is how much that phone rings with people saying, "Can you help us find a room?"
Yeah.
And so we call ahead all of that. Being a Tuesday could have been more of a challenge on that, just because people might come from a drive distance and go back home because
Right.
they've got to be back at work on Wednesday morning.
Okay.
But that's all I have.
So the request for an increase in their budget by 25,000 is because apparently there are more people coming.
Well, there are more people, and if you think about when we started contributing the 25,000, I've gone back multiple years, there's never been a request for an increase, and things have gone up. So everything costs more, and we can attest to that just on entertainment from the city events that we do, everything has gone up. And so, also you have to think about when, Robert Earl was doing it, there was some contribution there that we're not getting anymore, and so for us to get headliners, we're paying more. So there's that consideration too, so
And
there's
they've been
multiple.
doing that for us for, gosh,
20, at least 20.
Yeah, it was a long
Yeah.
time. I went back as far as I could go back on records, and there's never been a request for additional funds, and that's been the amount that we have funded for all
Well,
of
and
them,
at
so.
one point, we were getting sponsorships for the fireworks,
Which
and I know
we
we.
still do, but the city pays for that, so the
Mhm.
Fourth on the River organization as a whole does not pay for the fireworks, the city pays for that, through
Yeah.
the parks budget, but we do have sponsorships to offset that, so, and I will say that our
But we
parks
may not
team-
always have those
We may not always
sponsorships.
have those sponsorships, but our parks team works really hard to
Yeah.
get sponsorships to cover a lot of these free events and quality of life events, so that it's not assumed just as a solid expense.
I think that their 50,000 is a reasonable request.
Well, especially in light of, if you go down these bulleted items, the River Festival is 90,000, And-
It's the same thing,
And,
essentially.
yeah, I don't know why there's such a, almost a double difference in the cost there, because the KFOR event, to me, is the biggest event we have
Well,
for the year.
yeah, that's just our portion of it, so you have to think, yes, they are contributing a substantial amount. And then as far as, Riverfest, and, you know, this is historical, it's a little bit more than that this year, and there's some reasons for the drop in next year, which we're gonna talk about, but, you know, we do have some sponsorship stuff that offsets some of that too, so, and then that's also a different event, and so I think the idea was, looking back a couple of years, was we canceled it during COVID. We put a little bit more resource there, thinking we're either gonna grow this event into something that's bigger, or we're gonna make a decision whether we're gonna have it or not.
Right.
And so, you know, that's why we allocated some more resources in the last year or so, bringing that down a little bit in '24, just with some things that we've kind of internally had to make some decisions on about moving forward. But I think that was the idea, is, you know, we're gonna put some resources there. Fourth on the River, that event obviously costs way more than $50,000. It's just that they have other funding sources, and that's a third party that's putting that on, that it's not a city-sponsored event, so to speak. So I think the big question for me is, you know, funding them at a level that they need continues a third party managing that event. You know, if we were to not be able to do that, does the city want to assume responsibility for that event?
Right.
So, you know, you're talking about a completely different number. You start talking about that way, and it's an allowable expense through occupancy tax statute, so.
Well, and have we looked at maybe, changing our third-party event organizer
Yeah, that's a
to
conversation.
somebody
for-
that is more reasonable, or has more invested, or more of a stake? Like the people that do the KFOR event, would they be open to handling that River Festival?
Yeah, I don't know. I think those are conversations we probably need to have with Recreation, and get Ashley in the room and have a conversation. And, you know, and none of this has to be set in stone. It's just these are recommendations as of, again, historical, but that's why we need these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
Because all kinds of ideas come out of this. So I can certainly circle back with her, you know, see what that looks like. And I think it'll be a capacity issue, just, you know, what are these other organizations capable of doing? And then, you know, you're right, as we talked about, what do we need to own and what do we not need to own?
Yeah.
So
Okay.
certainly something we can circle back to, and maybe have a different conversation with Ashley and her team, and get her thoughts on it, because she has a lot more planning experience than us, so she'll bring a different idea to the table.
Okay.
Okay, so
I'm just asking
no,
questions.
Those are
So-
No,
great
those are great
ideas.
questions.
So what you are asking, Brenda, is would Parks and Rec want to take over the fourth? Is that what you're?
Not
No.
It's the Kerrville River Festival,
Yes.
and just because it
And then
apparently.
maybe Arcadia would take it over.
Yeah, or another local, you know, company that might save us the cost for an outside third party to run that event.
I mean, those are all definitely worth having that conversation, and I can certainly circle back to Ashley and put something together.
Okay.
We'll talk through some of that, and see what.
Okay.
Just because we've always done it a certain way doesn't mean we
Yeah.
have to always do it a certain way. That's why we have multiple ideas.
But again, 50,000 to, I don't think is an outrageous amount.
Oh, I
For what they do.
either, by
for
any
what they
stretch.
do for us.
90,000, I kinda raised my eyebrows at, sorry,
Okay,
but.
no,
I
that's why we have these conversations. Okay?
Cool.
All right, so I'll get some more information on that,
Okay.
visit with her, and we'll come up with some ideas and talk through that. I know that we've, had a lot of conversations, obviously, about the elephant in the room, which is solar eclipse. I have that 100,000 there as a plug. There's a lot more conversations coming to you, and if you give me a moment, I know we need to get through this, but, I'll bring you a little bit more information on that. So then, you know, you can see the community support components there. Playhouse 2000, that's ongoing, as we just talked about. Museum of Western Art, that's an ongoing, recurring that's been happening for a long time. Arcadia Live, that is a new request, this year. Their request was for 50,000 specifically for Arcadia Live. We've done a little homework, and Michael and I have actually talked about it and gone back through the statute to see, you know, how does that really fall in support, and to us, it comes back to promotion of arts. So we asked Meredith at Arcadia to run some numbers to tell us, what is your event venue being used for? What percentage is actually gonna be for promotion of arts that allows for other participants, other attendees, and what percentage is it being rented out for, local events, venues, Thursday, you know, the trivia nights, those kind of things that are more geared toward local, versus promotion of the arts. And about 59%, what she sent me over the last few years was really, either musical, performance-based, something like that. So, because of obviously the decline in what HOT has been doing, from a revenue standpoint, you know, staff recommendation would maybe potentially be to fund that at half of their request, for this year, just to kind of maybe give them a boost. Their idea really is to have more money for marketing so that they can go after some bigger name, headliners, to be able to bring in more out-of-town guests, because with their budget, they're kind of limited on the entertainment that they can get because of their budget. And so to have the number of events that they need to have, they're scaling back the cost per entertainment headliner, if that makes sense. And so they really want to see what can they do if they have a little bit more money. Again, the request was for $50,000 for fiscal year '24. So we kind of felt like it lined up with promotion of arts, you know, maybe more than tourism as far as heads and beds. But that would be our recommendation, was that maybe we do it on a trial run to see if that gives them some support that they need. But that's really open to discussion, and, you know, you guys have a bigger input on that than I do, but I wanted to let you know that was their request.
Have they been meeting their benchmarks per our agreement?
Yes.
Okay.
And they are doing their annual reporting as they're supposed to, and they're filing, you know, everything, and we have a pretty good working relationship with Stacy, over and Meredith both, and so I feel like that we have some pretty open conversations with them, and have met with them a few times on, not this specifically, but some various things that we've had coming down, and so, you know, we obviously, they put a lot into that facility to get it where it is, and I think it's a good venue, and we're seeing downtown kind of open up. I'm not gonna say because of that, but I think all those things are working parts, and so for everybody to be successful, we felt like that might be a good recommendation to give them a little bit of help this year and just see what they could do with some extra funds to bring in some bigger names or continue their mission.
With the Museum of Western Art, do we get anything from them? Same thing, we
Same
get
thing.
stats and
We get
that kind of.
stats, they provide us, so they actually do a visitor count when people check in to see where they're coming from, whether they spent the night, those kind of things, and they provide that to us on an annual basis, along with any marketing they do, and those kind of things, all the way down to invoices and receipts of exactly how they spent that money. So they're very good about providing that, and really all of our community, whether it's through this or through general fund community support, they're very good about that. And we've kind of created a standardized agreement over the past few years, and Jacob now is managing that, and actually goes out and meets with all these organizations that we support one-on-one to kind of talk through what is your mission, you know, is what we're doing really supporting that mission, and how does that look for the community, and that they're being able to provide a service that the city doesn't provide, that we may have to provide if we weren't supporting those.
Yeah.
How do we choose where we allocate community support funds? Both for, I guess, we have our HOT fund and general fund, we do that there too. How do we choose where we do that?
So some of that is by request, and we haven't had a lot of new requests in the past maybe 3-4 years. I haven't
Okay.
seen a lot of new requests come in. Usually those come in either through our office or through the city admin's office. You know, first we have to make sure that they align with laws. You know, is that allowable expense, first of all? Second, specifically on the general fund, are they providing a service that the city would have to provide that would be a larger expense than supporting them at a small dollar? And most of the ones on the general fund are very small dollars. And then, of course, new requests come to you guys to say, listen, you know, if an organization is doing what they're supposed to do, we're meeting with them, they're aligning, they're doing with what their agreement and all of that, they're doing the reporting and those things, then typically that's a continued annual support, unless council gives us different direction or that organization withdraws. A new request, then if it aligns with law and missions and everything, then we bring that to you as this organization came to us with a new request.
And how does one submit a request? Is that
We have an
known?
application for
Okay.
hotel occupancy tax specifically.
Okay.
In the general fund, it's gonna start with a discussion, and that starts at the admin level and then comes down through council to decide, you know, whether it's even a fit before we start gathering information. But hotel occupancy tax specifically, we do have an application for that we send out. In fact, I've sent out a couple in the past couple months that I haven't received anything back from. But if we have someone that calls and requests hot funds for whatever reason, then we send them an application along with the guidelines, the reporting requirements, and all the criteria. And some people look at it and they're like, that's way too much, we don't want to do that. But we do have to report to the comptroller every year how we're spending those funds, and it's a very specific report. So we have to make sure we're gathering the right information, even on the things we support internally. We keep very, very specific records to make sure that we're aligning with what the law is and what it allows us to use that for.
Okay.
So,
Is all of that like on the city's website, or how do people know about it? Because I feel like there aren't many people that know that
within
we
our
do
financial
this.
policies, it's in there. It's also, it's within the budget documents, within several things, but most people who, organizations who, are community support type organizations, they're familiar with the process, whether it's an external organization like Triathlon, for example. They know because they work in other cities, and so, they contact us.
Well, yeah, and it's also, it's like, for instance, CASA. These nonprofits will come to the city for grant money, as big or small as that may be, but it is in an effort to partner with the city to do a service that the city would have to do if they weren't there. And it's the same thing with, the Kerrville Pets Alive and them going to, yes, K-Star, all of those nonprofits. We as a city and as leaders for the city, we have to decide whether we want the burden ourselves or whether we want to invest a little in these nonprofits to take care of that, that action for us. And
They're experts in that area, and most of them, as I said, they perform very well within their own mission and really do a great job as far as, and most of them are small dollars, specifically on the
Yes.
general fund, it's really small, as y'all see those outlined in the budget each year. But to answer your question, they come directly to us for those requests.
What I would ask is to make sure that everybody's aware of this type of funding that's available for consideration, I guess to say, because it's not we're gonna give them the money. We have to budget for it. We have
Yeah, there's a
discussions.
process.
But I feel like in order for that to happen, we have an application for this, but I think it would behoove us to create an application for the general fund and to have a discussion, whether it needs to be just with staff, but certain qualifications that we're looking for with people who want this type of funding, so that everybody knows that it's available, the community is aware of it, and that it's not something that if somebody just comes and asks us, they're the only people that know. Everybody knows it's available and knows they have an opportunity if they want it.
So if you all want, so we have the ability now for folks to apply for the hotel occupancy tax funds. We review if they meet the statute, then it'll push forward to y'all, and then folks can apply for EIC community dollars. We don't have a process really set up for applications through the general fund, as it were. So if y'all decide you want us to put that out there and budget dollars for that, then we can do that. But we don't have. I don't think we don't currently have that.
We don't have that, right now. Most of the entities that are within the general fund community support are, as Brenda said, they're organizations that we would have to accept that responsibility for. So again, that's gonna make a decision about what's the overall budget for that particular line item each year, where's that money gonna come from, how far are you gonna spread it, and is what the support that you're providing doing those organizations any good? If you get it too thin, what's the process look like, who's on the committee? So there's a lot of questions I think that we could have an offline conversation about and decide how that needs to look.
Yeah, I'd like to see that happen.
So I was texting Ashley. And I'm still new. Will be for, according to Commissioner Letts, for the next 40 years. I'll still be new. Riverfest was set up as from the council directive of kind of July 4th 2.0, right? To be kind of mid-year away from that. And Arcadia is not interested in taking that over as putting that together. I think it has to do with they've got the kind of the one event on 4th on the River and then maintaining all the stuff that they do. They didn't want to have that additional portion of it. And I think the distinction between 4th on the River is we're a partial funder of that, and we're not the primary. And for us, Riverfest is part project that we run, and so I think we take on a larger role in that because it's our event. But yeah, the discrepancy in the funding, I understand, but I think it's because we take on a larger role.
That's
It's-
100%
it's
ours
ours.
minus the sponsorships.
Minus
And
the sponsorships,
so
yeah.
you do see the expense, but, we also have sponsorships that come in. And I will say Parks does a really good job of going out and seeking sponsorships for anything they're doing to
We'll keep
offset.
talking
so-
we'll keep talking to Ashley as we
Yes.
continue the budget
Okay.
conversation.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what we're paying an outside person, firm, to do that.
That's easy.
Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
easy,
Get you
and
that
we can also
information.
get you how much money's coming in to offset that. But
Okay,
then you'd be surprised how much sponsorship money we
okay,
get that offsets some of that, so.
all right.
Okay, all right, any other questions on HOT? I've just got like a couple more things and then I think we can wrap up here. Okay, so the next slide here is library memorial, and these are pretty regular expenses, no big surprises here this year. So no big surprises here this year as opposed to, the prior couple of years, we've had some big things. We've done the library ramp over there, the new HVAC, new lighting, some upgrades to the meeting room, which you haven't seen are really, really nice. The van, which has, been a big community asset. This year, not a whole lot of extraordinary expenses. We do have that construction project outlined there. That was first budgeted in 2022, so not to, kill the horse, but that money is still set aside for that. And then you can just kind of see some expenses that we have with books and public Wi-Fi. That's a service that Charby and Danielle have been working on, all the way back since COVID, when schools closed down, to be able to allow specifically kids at that time to have access to Wi-Fi that didn't, so that they could do homework and those kind of things when they were going to school from home. So that's a continuation of that. Some new security cameras for the playground and parking areas for obvious reasons, some furniture and display things, and then just some ongoing things, presenters for youth and things like that. So primarily, the Library Memorial Fund is funded by private donors. And so in-house, we kind of all joke that, we want to be the library because it seems like everyone, donates money to the library. And then secondary to that, Friends of the Library provides a contribution every year that's like a regular revenue stream. But then also, if there's a special project, a lot of times they'll chip in to help cover the cost of special projects that we have come up from time to time. So really two funding sources there, so there's no general fund money that is moved over to this at all.
How do we go about and potentially using library money to get a little bit of added security there at the library in light of the conflicts that are going on there now? That is I don't know whether we need a security guard there. We have a lot of homeless people that go in there. We have a lot of angry people that go in there. And those staff members, in my opinion, I feel like are sitting ducks. As city employees, they're not allowed to carry. So I would like to explore.
Okay, we can have that conversation with Danielle, and maybe she can take it to the Library Advisory Board, and we
Yeah.
can kick some things around. She can get with Kim, and they can talk about that and
Okay.
bring back some recommendations.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
I'd support that.
Okay. Okay, quickly, this thing's not working, I think that I need a battery or something. So just looking at the grant fund, not a lot of things going on in the upcoming year, but just wanted to point out the things that have been done. So basically, as we talked about before, the grant fund is really just a holding fund for anything special. And there's a lot of times when there's nothing budgeted in the grant fund, and then there's a lot of activity in the grant fund, as you've seen in the last few years. Larger grants, ARPA comes in through there, as we talked about, and with the budget amendment we recently passed for public safety assets, we'll be bringing you more on that as we finalize bids and kind of see that we're aligning with purchasing compliance because of federal rules and things like that. And then just pointing out there the things that we have either committed or that we have done with the grant fund in the past. So not really a lot of planned activity moving forward other than expenditure of the ARPA dollars, but that will change. I can't say it might, it will, because we have a lot of staff out there that work through grant processes all the time. The one thing about the grant fund is that anything that we spend over $750,000 every year is subject to a single audit, which is fine. It just means that our auditors have to do, it's a much more detailed look at grant spending. Are we spending in line with the grants that were given? Are we aligning with accounting practices as far as how we're accounting for money coming in, money going out, purchasing policies and those kind of things? So it's really specific, what we do here, and so, it's just a constant moving part, but you will see a line, within the finance budget, and then also when we presented financials, that's a single audit, and it particularly relates to this fund.
Okay.
The last really item on our list, and this is really not so much related to a 24 budget, a little bit of it, but solar eclipse. And so these are conversations we're going to continue to have. My anticipation, I think, would be that we bring you something back, probably in the form of a budget amendment early in the year. We're really still in the planning efforts for this. You know, we've had this conversation so many times. We'll continue to have it, but organization-wide, we're still planning. And so public safety, streets, public works, IT specifically, a lot of parts there, parks, finance. So we have a pretty big team internally, and then we have some external teams that are working through this as a community, really to kind of make some plans moving forward. So we don't really have a solid dollar for you yet, or recommendations about where that money is to come from. We are gonna, need some direction pretty soon once we can wrap that up as far as, what is gonna be council's direction? How far do you want us to go into this? And I can tell you where we can bring some money from. I can tell you, what we can do, what our possibilities are. And then, we'll just need some direction on what you want us to do once both chiefs kind of land on everything as far as public safety, and then Public Works is working heavily with public safety, and then, the IT components as well. The knowns, and you can see the things that we're working on. The parks event, so they're working on an event within the park with the idea that once the event is over, that people would kind of stay put for a little bit to minimize traffic and emergency response and those kind of things. Just some things that they've budgeted, entertainment, kids events. They are selling merchandise to offset some of that. They are working on sponsors and grants and already have some commitments for 23. They're working on 24. Their event is proposed at slightly over 400,000. Now that does include also citywide porta potties and some other things that you would think about needing. So we're working through kind of what sponsorship dollars do we have to offset some of that, because when you look at the big ticket picture of what it's going to cost overall, and then what really is council direction on what you want us to do. We can do this, we have to do this, so what do you want? And so
I want us to make some money off of this.
I don't see money really
So the
being
offsets of the revenue that you would
You're not gonna
generate,
see that.
as Julie was saying earlier, if there's an additional $10 million that would say, just as a generic number in sales, that would be $100,000 that would come in. And so it's not
we're
a
not gonna
big
make money
portion
off
of
this.
it.
Yeah.
So, there's a couple of things that, we're continuing to work through the processes. Now that the legislative session's finally over, they ended the last one, I think we can start getting a few of the legislators at least on the phone to discuss this. We're not gonna be the only city who's dealing with this.
Right.
Some of the cities are actively going, we don't wanna, there's nothing going on here. Don't, ignore it. They've asked TxDOT to close the highways, which TxDOT obviously said no to. And so, I think the level at which you all want us to look at different options, because there's gonna be a lot of people that are gonna show up, right? That part's inevitable. And from PD and fire standpoint, EMS standpoint, there's gonna be a lot of issues from public works standpoint. Regardless of what happens, they're gonna have a lot of work to do. We're all gonna be all hands on deck kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, we do not have a funding source necessarily lined out for it.
And there's not any kind of grant
That's what we're working
Well,
on.
that's what we're
help
gonna work
or
on with the state.
recovery help we could
And so
apply for?
part of the challenge with that
That's
is.
disaster relief fund?
So part of the challenge with that is
That's what we're hoping.
we're advertising for an event, and then we're asking for a disaster declaration. So they're like, well, if you're advertising it for it,
Right.
then why do you need a disaster declaration?
Yeah.
So it's kind of a, so it gets a
Double-edged
little-
sword.
it certainly gets a little complicated, but we don't have the resources to triage, 150,000 extra people in town for multiple days. It's hard, staffing is difficult enough. The chiefs will be able to explain this much better, but we're not done. we're
No.
still sussing out,
We are.
kinda, here's what, biggest dollar
Is
scenario
this
would be.
committee's meeting weekly, right?
More like
Monthly?
Monthly right
Okay.
now.
Monthly and
Yeah.
then smaller groups ongoing on a
Okay.
regular,
It'll
lot
get-
of, lot of discussions.
It'll get
Huh?
closer.
working weekly on it.
Oh, you're
Yes.
working weekly,
Yeah.
got it.
Convening more, but working
Four
constantly.
meetings a
To
week.
give you a quick
Never
number,
gonna
just
talk
to
about
you're
it.
making money, so on Julie's 1,047 rooms, if they were rented for 4 days at $200 a night, our occupancy tax would be $58,000.
Oh, yeah.
So we can't look at it as a revenue.
Right.
I mean, and to $10 million in gross sales is $100,000 in sales tax. So
Mhm.
it's not going to be a moneymaker. We
Okay.
have to look at it more of, are we managing this from an emergency standpoint? Are we taking care of the citizens that live here?
Yeah.
And are we kind of keeping things from, keeping the wheels on so that it doesn't?
Yeah, if we could just break even, it would, you know.
Well, we're
make me
looking
happy.
under every rock, let's
Okay,
put it that way.
awesome.
But a lot of planning, but I don't anticipate this being solid by the time we bring you the proposed budget in
Mhm.
August. We're just not there.
Okay,
But know that it's constantly being worked on.
Okay.
And so we will likely have a workshop of some sort to have this discussion in more depth, to say, this is what we see, here's what we have to do, here's what we can do,
Mhm.
what do you want us to do, and here's where money could or can't come from.
Okay.
So we're, on every level, we're communicating with every agency that could possibly assist us.
Okay.
You know, TDEM deals with stuff all year, every year, whether it's hurricanes or drought or fire. And so they triage the situation that's in front of them and they look ahead as far as they can. But when we talk to them about, hey, here's our April event, they're like, yeah, sure. You're gonna have an issue and we'll work through it. But as a final plan, it's hard for them to commit to anything that far ahead because they don't know what's in front of them.
yeah.
If we're gonna have another freeze in, you know, in the winter, whatever's gonna happen between now and then. So we're gonna keep contacting folks. See what-
And y'all are in discussions with cities that have already experienced this, correct?
Yes.
On what, you know, what problems they had,
Yes.
just to try and get in front of that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
So from a public safety standpoint, those guys are deep in conversation about preparing for that piece and
Okay.
then kind of trickling down to the rest of us that are gonna be affected and how we assist in that and then how do we pay for it. So I think we're definitely gonna have a big conversation. We wanna just have more details to be able to bring to you. It's just, there's a lot of moving parts on that. And then, as Michael said, where's the money gonna come from?
right.
To pay for it, so I'm gonna try to bring you whatever resource that I can and we'll just wait for direction.
TxDOT said it can't be canceled.
Right.
Unless it rains.
Am I correct in that Chalk Fest will be the same
Yes.
day as the Eclipse?
That's my plan.
Riverfest is the same day as the
It's the
2023.
Well, but in October, is the Chalk Fest not on the same day?
Riverfest.
Just Riverfest,
Yeah,
but not
my
Chalk
knowledge.
Fest?
I thought Riverfest and Chalk Fest go together.
See, I thought Chalk Fest was also that.
They
day.
go
That's gonna be a big
simultaneously.
weekend.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a big weekend.
It will be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chalk Fest is out here in the,
Yeah.
Because that's like a 2-day thing. I think they start the day
2 days.
before the
It's
river
not gonna be
festival.
as big, but it's gonna be a good
Yeah,
test
they do.
case
It's
for us.
actually
3 days, yeah, you're right.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's during,
So
yeah,
that'll be a big weekend.
yeah.
so there's just a lot to draw,
That's right.
so.
So anybody have questions, comments, other direction, I've taken notes on the things that you've requested and we'll circle back on those items.
All right. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You've done a super job, and let's take a break before we reconvene for 2B. And
We're reconvening for what?
10 minutes.
Messing with her.
We saw a typo, this, what is it, hot potion?
Maybe it wasn't a typo, Michael.
Well, I had two last night, I spelled Kerrville with one R twice in the attachments that I had.
Well, I have successfully
This
missed
guy,
my
he was,
bank president and directors meeting.
Session after our break, and I believe that we have a special guest with us. Colby, is it Eccles?
Yes.
All right. And you're going to talk to us about TERS. Thank you.
Thank you all for letting me be here. I understand that the city is exploring a second TERS, so I am here to speak about the tax increment reinvestment zone district. I will go through this presentation. I would hope that if you have any questions, you'd stop me as I'm going. I would like for this to be a free-flow conversation, to the extent you can. Reinvestment zone is located within the city or the ETJ to be able to capture the tax value within the defined area. The TIRS is created by the council, and the base value of that district is established whenever the council approves the district. My understanding is that it's greenfield right now. I don't know what the value of the tax district is currently, but if the council were to approve the creation of the TIRS, that value would be frozen in time. And the city would capture that value from the date of creation until the expiration of the TIRS. The city can collect either property taxes or sales taxes within the district.
But not both.
Ma'am?
Not both. Just one or the
I
other,
believe
correct?
they can collect,
They can collect both?
I believe, depending on the development agreement.
Okay.
But
Okay,
it's my understanding that retail will not be included in this district. It's all going to be.
Okay. okay.
So the TIRS district is a performance-based district. It is, the developer must create value within the district to be able to get paid. So they have to build homes in order to capture the incremental value. I'll show you a chart in just a minute, between that base and over time as that taxable assessed valuation grows. So without the developer doing anything, they won't get paid. The city's going to capture all the base. If they build one house, they'll get the incremental value for the one house. They need to complete the development in order to be reimbursed for the work that they're, for their participation within the TIRS. The goals of the TIRS are to provide infrastructure. In this case, it's to provide affordable housing for your residents, reimbursing with our homes in order to have them run at the price of those homes. What can be funded? We have a list here: public works, streets, water, sewer facilities, industrial malls, which can be retail, not included here. The whole myriad of items that could be funded with TIRS. In this case, it's going to be offsetting costs of housing, keep it for residents who can participate any overlapping taxing jurisdiction. Typically, we do not see schools participating, but we do see cities, we see counties participate. You could have, I don't know if there's a service area within the district that they could participate as well. Likely not. Typically it is cities and counties that participate. And in doing so, the city does not have to participate at the same level as the county. You can have two separate levels of participation. You can say, city could say, we're going to give 40% to the district, keep 60%. County could do vice versa, 60-40. It's depending on the development agreement between each entity. On slide 3, this is the graphic of double tax increment revenue zone. In this case, we are showing either a cap on revenues collected by the developer or a specific period of time for the zone to expire. Typically what we see, in my experience, is more so an expiration date, but there are instances where there is a cap, and that cap is based on cost of development within the district. So whenever the city goes through the process of establishing the developer agreement, you will work closely with the developer, and they will provide a number and say it's going to be X dollars. And it where the district will expire once that value is hit, or you can do it where it expires on a date specific, or you can do it where it's the lesser of. It is, okay, we hit the value on this date, but we still have 10 years to go on this district, but it's going to expire because we hit the value. So it's completely dependent upon how you want to structure the development agreement.
And which one did you say is more common?
What I have seen typically is an expiration date. That's not to say that doing a value is not common, but just with my personal experience. I know that Ann has pretty extensive experience with these districts, and she has seen both. So you would not be out of the norm to go one way or the other. It's just personal.
And if, my next question is premature, because if you're going to talk about it more in a little bit, please stop me and let me know that. But I'd also want to know, what are the pros and cons? Why would we do one over the other, or do a lesser of the both?
You could do the lesser of the both. It encourages the developer to get the district done.
Okay.
Encourages them to, to build out so that they can capture new values. The date could be beneficial to the district if you set a date and let's say the development costs for the district were $15 million. The date comes, they've only collected $10 million. You don't have to pay that $5 million. The zone expires and the developer is effectively out $5 million.
And the opposite side of that, not the opposite side, but the other way is that they build out the entire thing very quickly, and now all those houses are on the tax rolls, and let's say there's a 25-year term on that, and they get done in 15 years. Well, now the TERS is done 10 years before we expected it to be, and all that property is now fully on the tax rolls back to the city 10 years earlier.
I have a kind of a dumb question.
There are none.
Okay, we pay a certain amount of property taxes to the county.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, how is the county, the money we pay to the county impacted by this? Do we still pay the value to the county, the fully assessed value, or are they out because that, I mean, it's separate.
Yeah, unless they participate, then they're paid the normal assessment if it's a house that's in another neighborhood, not the TERS at $250,000.
Right.
And this one is $250,000.
We're still paying them for that value, that property
The
tax.
homeowner is gonna pay that property tax to the
Yeah.
county.
Okay.
Unless they participate, in which case it would be X% to the county, and then the TERS portion
Okay.
would get put into that pot.
Remember, if they participate, they get a seat at the table, so they get a member or multiple members on the TERS board.
Okay,
So they have some
okay,
control, oversight.
all right, I just wondered about that.
It's unlikely.
Well, and in this case, because it would be outlined for specific use, it wouldn't be like the current TERS we have right now to where
Right.
there's decision-making about the way the money is spent. It would be very clearly outlined to where whoever is at the table, the TERS is for a specific purpose. And so that's the difference between starting with zero
Right,
and starting with current properties. They're on the roll already.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, we'll go into the administrative responsibilities of the clerkers. You guys already have one established, so I would imagine that y'all are pretty familiar with that, so I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time really on this. We do have issuance of debt. It does not sound like that would be a case with this entity. It would just be reimbursement to the debt.
That's great.
Actually, these next few slides are probably very very well known to you guys. The roles with people that are involved, Ann and myself would work with you for the financial aspect of it, and Paige would be working on development agreements between our homes and the city, probably with help of bond counsel as well. I don't know in this instance that a tiers consultant would be necessary, but it is a player that is sometimes involved in things.
The difference between this one and the current one that you have is the current one that the city has, how many, 60 properties, 80 properties? More than that even?
More than that.
More than that, right? And this is a property. So, in the scope of how complicated it would be to set up, it's much easier. You know?
And we're looking at total value added to the roll, same as we look at now, versus the base year. And so the base year would be upon potential annexation, I guess, and what that value is at the time of annexation. That would be based, because there is no development on it at this time. So it would be pretty clean, actually, in my opinion. And then each year, because it's geographical, and that's the other beauty of it is, you're not having to do it through general fund, as we talked about. So from a transparency standpoint, this is your geographical location. You're talking about these properties, anything within this defined region, and it's super easy and transparent for us to say, within this region, this is the base year, and this is every subsequent year after that, and what that value is.
In this particular case, are we anticipating issuing bonds?
No, sir.
It's just on your chart.
Yeah, it's an option.
It is an option. Typically with a lot of times with the tax bonds will be issued to finance the development within the developers on cost, and the city will just be reimbursing. So the next steps would be creating development agreements, sending out terms, between the city and the developer. My understanding is the developer knows Ann very well, she would be involved with the process. The terms that we have discussed, that are discussed through here, are not uncommon. Determining a percentage, we have asked for information from the developer to be able to help determine the revenue capture, the timing, how long we think development of the district is going to take, revenue growth within that, when we think if there is a number, then that number will be hit, whether it's better to go with certain, less reliable. But once we have that information, we can develop spreadsheets that forecast out and look at that and provide information for the city. It's my understanding that the area in question is not within the city limits or the ETJ, so the council would have to annex it in to be able to tax that district and capture it. You would have to have a public hearing to discuss creation of the district, and then it would require council action to create.
And with our ordinances, since we require 2 readings on every ordinance, does the public hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is it public hearing with the first reading and then second reading, or do we have to have a public hearing and then the 2 readings separate?
I don't recall.
Okay.
So we'll get back to you. In fact, I just wrote down timing.
Okay.
So that we can kind of match all this up, because obviously the annexation and the zoning is coming.
Right. Right. Okay.
A lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts. There's annexation and zoning. There's EIC contribution, which was discussed last night. And then this is the preliminary of, do y'all want to even consider this mechanism? And so, one of the questions we got last night was, well, why don't these folks just buy the property and then we can get started? As we all know, going through this process, nobody's going to buy it until they've worked through all their entitlements, whether it's zoning or an incentive agreement. It's just a contract to purchase, right, that would close upon X, Y, and Z happening. And we'll condition any agreements that we have on the same thing, right? You don't close on the property, this agreement's null and void. You don't do X, this agreement's null and void, kind of thing. So That was one of the questions we got last night.
From the public.
From the public, that's correct, yeah.
So should the annexation, does that normally happen before the agreement's developed and created, or is that the order that it happens in?
I don't know that it's necessarily the order that needs to happen. It just, it has to happen before council approves creation of the zone.
Okay.
So we could be working through the process and not be totally finalized and have it at the same meeting and have one item.
Or even do where the development, grant agreements, if you will, are subject to annexation and zoning. So in other words, if that doesn't occur, then the agreement doesn't kick into gear.
So it's
The EIC
after,
grant develop,
Right.
the grant
Well, you do
agreements,
both of them, but I mean, we're,
Okay.
we'll,
all three of these, the
We talked about-
annexation,
yeah.
this agreement, and the grant agreement.
So no money changes hands.
Right.
And it would be essentially
it's not valid until
dissolved if
y'all said yes.
it also,
Okay.
So y'all
And-
said yes to annexation.
one can be contingent on.
Zone, or, EIC basically gave us the go-ahead last night.
They gave staff direction to finalize, because there's, in the agreement that we had drafted, we had put 100 homes per year for them to complete, which is in excess of what they feel they can actually do per the agreement. So they'd given us a number of 62. And so we'll make some modifications to that, and then a couple other things that EIC discussed. And that's going back to EIC next month, for the meeting, in August. And so we'll kind of run these things in tandem, but yes, the direction was to finalize an agreement with Lennar for $5 million.
It was a tentative agreement.
Tentative agreement, yeah, so,
And contingent, of course, on all these things.
exactly.
I think that was a concern, is we're doing an agreement for something we don't know, but no money would change hands, obviously, if they can't fulfill their part of it. I think to Michael's point, they're not gonna go buy a piece of property if they don't know they can go ahead with the project.
They're not,
Yeah.
I can guarantee it.
Yeah, so one of the other things we've done is sent Ann and Colby some numbers from Lennar to basically say this is what they anticipate dollars added to the roll each year. So that then we can go out and look at, what those numbers actually look like from a property tax standpoint. And so that when you say if you're anticipating X number of dollars hitting the roll, then what does that look like from a general fund refund type situation at a 80-20, 70-30, 75-25? What does that look like as far as impact to the city? So then we can do some more information on the revenue rates and those kind of things, just to see kind of how that drives us.
Now, this doesn't include debt,
That's correct.
so this would be
That's right.
maintenance and operation.
We're excluding any debt from this.
So
our
debt
debt
would
fund
go
not
to
be
the
hit.
city, right?
Yes,
Mm.
because that was a big concern, is you
Yeah.
can't put a refund against something that we are obligated to pay. So it won't touch INS at all. And Ann said that's not unlikely, that's not atypical.
Yeah.
Most of the time, TERS does not include that.
So from a mechanic standpoint, if you all decide that you want to kind of start walking down this path to see what it looks like, I would want to get direction from y'all to go ask the county to consider participating in it. They've said they want to help with economic development.
But has the county, has that ask been made from the developer?
No, because they have not, they wanted to have that conversation with us first, but I told him that he's gonna have to come with us in that discussion, yeah. So,
Have fun.
yes, sir, I will, I have a well-reasoned argument, and
That won't work.
if they say no, they say no, but, they have said in the past and articulated that they want to participate in economic development. This is a mechanism for them to do so. This is a workforce housing issue, which is the same issue for the sheriff
Yep,
as it is for PD and fire and public works and all of us here.
good argument.
So, if they, but for this, and it would also lessen the burden for you all. But that does change the makeup of the TERS board. And so, we'll start having those conversations.
Right, I think that
If
was.
they're participating, yes.
But
yes.
if they were not to, then we could potentially utilize the same one if they were to, then we would need to, which pretty easy.
Okay, then I may have gotten a little confused right there about the TERS board. Would we create a new TERS board?
Yes.
It is new, right? Okay, I thought, I heard somebody say it would change the existing one.
If we incorporate the county,
And we may have to have a separate one anyway.
yeah.
Or
Because the
those
county
same
has
ones
to
may
have
wear two
positions.
hats.
We have
I'm not
direct
sure.
board for our downtown currently.
So would we have to have a separate one for this number 2 zone?
But it could be the same,
It's-
it could be the
Could
same
be the
people.
same,
Yeah.
But if
Kinda
the
like
county
you do with employee benefits
participates,
trust. You just wear two hats.
Right. So when they convene, they'll just have 2 different meetings in a
Based
way.
on this construct, they, like Julie said earlier, there's really not too much decision-making, that, if at all. And so you could run them, you know, one meeting would open and then close, and then the next meeting would open and close.
Right.
If it was just a city, zone. But if the county participated, you'd have to seat one of them or one of their representatives at least.
And either way, we would need to go through the process of appointing the exact same individuals. It doesn't happen by default, right?
That's right.
either
Okay.
the same or a new board, yes.
And the distinction on this one would be, you know, we don't have specific projects for this current TERS. This one would be very specific. Here would be a dollar amount max, here would be the years, and it would be one-time payments annually, probably. I mean, we can set it up different ways, but here's your submissions, here's what you can get back, here's your, you know, pay request. And so we would review all that prior to the meetings and say, here's what they're authorized to get disbursements of, here's your funds available, you can pay it out.
And it's very cut and dry, because
Yeah,
it's
it's
only on
easy.
the property tax side, and those numbers are facts, and there's nothing arbitrary about that.
So if we had the same TERS board, but we added a county person, could we add the county person just for purposes of that one specific project? So he comes in for that project and then leaves after that project, since he wouldn't be involved in any of the decision-making for the original TERS that we
Yeah,
set
it
up?
would be a separate, I mean,
I don't know how
I
many
think
people they
it
would
would
wanna
need to
have,
be
I
a
mean,
separate board.
yeah, it would have to be, right? And so it would be a separate meeting almost, but you could
Right,
run them.
separate meeting, you can
Yeah.
have the same,
But
wouldn't be
you
as,
can't just put them in and take them out, I don't.
Well, it would be a board, it's
Yeah.
be TERS
Yes.
board, you know, TERS number 2.
Yeah.
And
we could have the same people that we have on TERS 1, but just add a county person.
Well, no, you need to take off a person from the current TERS board
Yeah.
to replace for the
Yeah, I
county
think-
rep.
it has to be
I
a
think
certain
I'd have
number.
a new board.
Yeah.
I think it
New
would be
board.
much cleaner, much simpler, much easier.
Yeah, those are all just moving parts that we could
Okay,
definitely work
do we have any further questions for Colby? Is there anything that we need to ask of him?
How do you like that Austin traffic?
If I could live in Kerrville, I would do it.
We would welcome you here.
All right, then what you need from us is consensus to move forward.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Go to the county,
Yes, I think what we would like to do is, because it's all been kind of fluid since we've been discussing with EIC, with you all about the TERS, how many homes they can get built in a year, changing up the configuration, has changed up some of the infrastructure. And so we're still waiting on the opinions of probable cost for the engineers on their public infrastructure. And so we'll have to have that as a final portion of the TERS. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. So we're going to continue to do that. I think the biggest question is the number of years for a TERS. Typically, the ones that I've seen, been a part of, were 25 years long. And the value that you want to place on that TERS. So what we were discussing earlier was really here's the cost of the public infrastructure. Do you want to include that whole cost of the public infrastructure? Do you want to set a dollar value limit on it? Do you want to take the cost of that public infrastructure, back out the regional infrastructure costs that EIC would pay into, and then leave that as a number? So when we were talking about this with Ann, she said, when you see a value, there will be a value. That Valley Soul project that I was showing you all in San Antonio, the cost of the public infrastructure was $22 million. The TERS was for $22 million in 25 years. If they get to 22, then they get to 22. If they don't,
they don't. So we can bring you a few iterations, but I know that the request from Lennar would be to not have a cap on the value, have a cap on the time and the percentage for which the city would participate. So
Would you like a consensus from us on that today?
that would, I mean, that's.
Would be
That would be
helpful.
helpful. And then we'll see where the county would be interested in participating. But
Does-
that part would be helpful.
Just wondered, you all knew the changes, no 25-foot lots.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew.
So it's 35, so it's 35 and 45-foot lots. It's about a 50-50 split at this point. The zoning would be for no less than 35-foot lots. And then we could memorialize the development agreements that it would be a 50-50 share or whatever that portion y'all would prefer. Yeah, so really that's the big kind of X factor in there for Lennar. That was the discussion.
What's the advantage to Lennar with not capping the value? Is that what you said?
Well, so it's to recoup the cost of that public infrastructure over time.
Right.
Yeah, so you set a cap on the value, but we had a number, just a number placed in there, which is gonna be less than the cost of that public infrastructure. So their request is to go above that.
Continue collecting.
Yeah,
That's why some do the
but you
years.
set a cap on, that's why you'll see it in the years. But it's the purview of the board, so it can be.
Trying to understand that.
Well, I think if we were to bring some numbers back from Ann and Colby, as we talked about, we might be able to get a better look at what does the split look like, what is the duration, what is the map. We can bring you like several different options to say, and that, you know, if it's an interest, as much
Yeah,
as
I
you
mean,
want us to go
But
forward and get
essentially-
Isn't it
information.
really about breaking even versus making some profit?
Well, yes, and yeah, so what they prefer, and what I've seen in some of the other TERS agreements with Lennar and San Antonio is, here's the cost of the public infrastructure, and that public infrastructure is placed in as the max value of the TERS that they could collect over time, and either that is collected over 25 years, and it runs out, or either it's collected less than 25 years, and the TERS is done, or they go through the 25 years and they don't collect all of it. But that's,
Do we make up the difference then if it's not collected
no,
by
it's
the
just
time
over. They take a
Okay.
chance on that, so
Okay.
you want them to be able to pay it, you want it to be paid off
Yeah.
early, right? Because then the whole development has been made.
Yeah.
And you have years left on it that it goes away, and that's fully on your tax rolls now. So, we had a dollar value that was set just based on what the body was comfortable with, and I think it was, before we were having discussions with them about, you know, what are the typical mechanisms, what are the typical ways that they do that, and that's based on an actual dollar figure of a cost of the infrastructure. So, we can do a set amount, or you all could do the cost of the infrastructure that they will build.
Are you asking for that feedback right now?
Yeah,
Like, okay.
it would be helpful.
Sorry,
in
go
the
ahead.
discussions.
Okay, just so I'm clear, right now, the value is, okay, I wanna simplify it. Let's say it's just a lot and not a, all this acreage, okay? And the lot is valued at, let's say, $10,000.
$1 million, this thing's valued, I did the math, it's about $1 million.
Okay, so now, once they start placing houses on this, and those houses, the tax increment on those houses is $4,200 each. They're gonna collect all of that, because that is the increment.
So the
From
tax.
$1 million?
No, only our part, only the participating agencies, right? So these houses are gonna be anywhere from $200,000 and $260,000. Let's say
Yes.
they're 200, right? Our
Okay.
portion is 50 cents, so $1,000, right, ish?
Okay.
So the original base value
Okay,
of the $1 million,
Yeah.
that will go to us entirely. Then whatever percentage y'all decide we should keep, and we take all of that $1,000. Let's say it's 85-15 or 75-25. They would get 750 of that, and we would get 250 of that over the life of the TERS. And
Okay.
either it's paid off early, or the TERS years run out. Yeah, the same, what you see there, yeah.
And it can be and or, right, or could be both.
So that
It could
dark
be
blue.
Whether you meet the dollar or the years, or you have to meet, I mean, we can design it how
You can design it however you want.
Okay.
It would probably be a lesser
But, yeah.
thing.
Okay.
We have to $1 cap. That would
Okay.
make no sense.
So here's your land, raw land,
Yeah,
right? They start building the houses.
mm-hmm,
Let's say this is, well, they cut it here 60%, but I think it's gonna be more like 25.
okay,
So we would take home 25% of that, and the 75% would go into the TERS, and each and every house in that district would do the same thing.
okay,
And every year, they would come back to the table and say, here's how many houses we built, here's the cost of our infrastructure, and this is the reimbursement request they're gonna have. And that reimbursement request is gonna be well above what we have available until it's, 15 years down the road.
okay.
So one consideration, and we talked about this with Hilltop last week, is, of course, as we talked about, when you add value to the role, then you're gonna have a natural change to your known revenue rate. That's the way it works. So, in my opinion, for what it's worth, is you kind of have to find out where's that magic balance, because, if we add $200 million to the role, then what's the impact to the known revenue rate? And so, if the impact to the known revenue rate is half a penny, just to say, then what's half a penny look like to your general fund revenue? And then what is 25%
Right.
of what me adding to the TERS gonna offset that half a penny? And so that you're not losing from a general fund standpoint.
Right.
You might not be gaining, because we're gaining rooftops, we're gaining,
Yeah. Yeah.
meeting goals and those kind of things, but we have to think about things like public safety, we have to think about, other, all the components we continue to talk about, you're adding maintenance, you're adding operations, those kind of things. So that's why we really want to let Ann and Colby, before we kind of start throwing out, we think it should be this,
Yeah.
work on the numbers that Michael sent over to say this is what we think it's gonna look like over time, and if we did this, then this. And granted, we're not gonna get down to a known revenue rate for every year. I
Yeah.
can't give you one now for this year we're in.
Yeah.
But we can at least do some preliminary assumptions to say, if we added X millions of dollars, and it takes a pretty big dollar amount to impact that known revenue rate. But the reality is, if you add whatever, then it will. And so we want that, because that's what we're trying to do here, is provide the right kind of housing. But just where's that number? And so
Yeah.
they're work through that for us.
Okay.
So this is not the only TERS request you're going to get. There is another development that's asking for a TERS. But that is a whole different reason. They're trying to create a public improvement district. And this is over by Comanche Trace. This is Meek Ranch, Rosemary Meek's property. So we were talking to Triple Root, remember that, last year? Some of the same folks have bought the property next to it. And they have a PID petition in place, and they want to use the TERS to buy down the assessment that their homeowners will get. So a PID is an assessment, not a tax, and it's placed on each property. And so they have a big number, and their number goes over what would technically be $3 in taxes, which is over what the state will allow. And so the TERS is there to buy that down. So my point in saying all that is, this TERS that we're talking about here today is an effort for us to solve part of a workforce housing issue that we have. And so I think while, there's no perfect solution to that. There's certainly a high cost associated with it. But working towards solving that portion of issues that we have. And yes, we are gonna miss out on some of that revenue that would help cover the cost of those things. However, I'll have less of a hard time when we talk to the chief, both me and Kim, when he says we have a resignation because our police officer couldn't find a place to live in this town. And I personally, I would prefer to not have to have too many more of those conversations, because it's a hard one, I had a young man who's living in Seguin, and he's like, I got a job over in Cibolo or something, because I couldn't find a place here. So to me, that's the the value for this TERS and this discussion is to help with that workforce housing issue. But
So, what we need to know from all of you, right now, if I'm understanding you correctly, you would like to, do we want to work off of an expiration date or value only? I say value only,
Well,
that's not.
the lesser of two, I
yeah.
think, is
Yeah.
what it would be. And so what I imagine we would propose, as we go back, talk to them, we need to get those final numbers from them. Run on the assumption that the city is the only participant, but then go have that discussion. And then we'll run through the mechanisms. Now, this is a residential TERS only, so the petition will come from the landowner. We'll have them petition the city. That's a part of that process, I believe. So we'll go through all the legal mechanisms we'll have to go through. Takes some notice in the paper, so it wouldn't be on the 25th, because we won't make any deadlines. So earliest we would bring it back would be the 8th, but they have to give us all their numbers. And that would be preliminary finance plan and a public hearing on the TERS. And then hear it out, have the discussions, we move forward, then finalize the ordinances, set up a TERS board. So a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions. Yeah, it's all outlined there. So I think I have what I need.
I was gonna say, Roman,
The cap
are
on
you
the
in?
cap on the dollars is the question, right? So
That's the question you want us
and
to
that-
answer, or?
No, that they'll bring the information back to us.
they'll bring some of that back for you, because we don't know what their infrastructure costs are. So they'll come back and they'll ask for it all, right? They'll ask for the whole thing, and what is the participation rate you wanna participate at? So I think that's probably what we'll be coming back to you with, is say there's a $10 million public infrastructure piece. They'll say, okay, we would like this TERS to be $10 million in 25 years, and what participation rates would you guys like to participate at? And we'll have that discussion with Hilltop on, here's where that makes sense, and we'll bring that back.
Joe, you're good to go? Brenda? Jeff?
ma'am.
Roman? All right,
Thank
you
you.
got it.
Appreciate that. Thank you. This is 2 days in a row for Joe.
That's good.
And a lot more conversation.
Colby, thank you for being here,
Yes,
and
thank you
we'll
very much.
look forward to they will look forward to working with you more, and we'll look forward to numbers that you guys will be bringing us down the road, so. Okay,
Do you need us
Awesome.
to
Thank you so
determine
much.
whether
Thank
you
you,
need
Colby.
to go to the county or not, or you're good with that?
I think I'm good to go.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll start talking to Commissioner Letts about putting an item on the agenda for a discussion with them. Because I think they're gonna wanna have the same discussion that you all have. I want Joe to come with me.
Yes. We've been stink eye.
But I think that would be my next steps with them, is just the.
Just don't take me along, because it'll be an automatic no.
okay.
You don't need to go to executive.
No, I don't think I'm good. I mean, Mount Saddle is public hearing for, next month with the IC. So I don't have any additional information.
With the caveat, we're still calling it Mount Saddle, we're not
Yeah.
revealing it.
2 weeks.
Yeah. So if y'all wanna go into executive session to discuss it, we can. That's y'all's purview. But I don't have any more on Project Wind Ridge, which we just discussed, which is the TERS. And Mount Saddle there's no specific request from council. So I can give you an update, not right now. I think there's some discussions about down the road of joint city and county discussions on some infrastructure for upgrading a road. But
Right now, really nothing else new? Okay. I see no need to go into executive session then. So, anybody have anything else for the cause? All right.
Thank you all for taking the time.
And Kim, anything for us?
No, ma'am. Thank you very much.
And
We
we've heard
appreciate
from
it.
finance, Mike?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay. At 11:17, we will dismiss and close this meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Did everybody get a copy of that TERS